stone turns between two fingers, and its owner asks, almost bored, whether that was really everything the other side had to offer. The stone comes down hard enough to rattle the board, and he already knows how this ends. Across from him, a man in dark glasses stops smiling and starts actually playing. Another stone lands fast and precise, exactly where it hurts most, and the man in glasses goes stiff. That move should not exist in this game. Stones fly everywhere as the entire board is thrown into the air. There's no rule for what just happened, and the man who lost is screaming. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Young man smiles, 10 years deep into a game nobody taught him. Grown men are already running, realizing this was lost before the first stone ever touched the board. 10 years back is where this actually starts, with a boy who had nothing and nobody. 9 years old, and he already wore the face of someone who had stopped expecting help. Home was Gunchang, the block the rest of the city had quietly written off. His little sister was 8, and she carried exactly the same reality on her shoulders. A battered ball goes up over the rooftops, kicked far harder than it needed to be. Street kids scream at each other not to let Do-yoon reach it. Grab his shirt, hold him, do anything, just do not let that kid get to the ball. Do-yoon goes straight through all of them, and not one hand on him slows him down. A keeper flinches out of the way, and the ball detonates against the wall behind him. Somebody yells the obvious question: what kind of keeper runs away from the ball? The worn-out ball rolls on across the dirt, still carrying the weight of that kick. Do-yoon watches all of it in silence, knowing exactly how far down this place sits. In a world run entirely on violence, a 9-year-old orphan is the cheapest thing on the street. One of the boys calls the game off. That is enough, and his parents will be here soon. Do-yoon walks away with a flat warning. He played with them. Now nobody bothers him on his own block. A boot comes down on the ball and stops it dead in front of him. Standing on it is Kim Moo-won, smiling at what is clearly no ordinary kid. Moo-won flicks the ball back to him. Come along, quit arguing, and appreciate that he is asking nicely. It rolls to a stop at Do-yoon's feet, and that is the end of the negotiation. Do-yoon does not move. Since owing anybody anything is a debt he cannot pay, Moo-won laughs. This kid has a real gift for saying the one thing nobody wants to hear. Sweating, suspicious, and out of options, Do-yoon follows the man into the streets. Do-yoon asks straight out where they are going. Moo-won says the warehouse, and the little sister quietly corrects him. It is just a house. What kind of house? Do-yoon wants to know. An empty one. Moo-won says, still smiling, everything about this man is wrong for this neighborhood, and Do-yoon notices it immediately. Inside, the place is a disaster, and Moo-won waves at the mess and tells them to sit anywhere. Hauling 2 kids home has made him hungry. He says Do-yoon says he came here to work, not to eat. Moo-won tears a ramyeon packet open with his teeth and warns that this food is his. Then he drops the packets on the table and points at the clothes all over the floor, because that is the job. Do-yoon stares at him without a single word, while his sister watches the whole exchange. Moo-won catches the look and cheerfully admits there is even more mess to clear than last time. Fine, he will pay a little extra. He has never met a 9-year-old this expensive. His sister reaches for the clothes and he stops her, since the work is his and not hers. Arms loaded with laundry, Do-yoon asks whether that is genuinely all he has to do. Moo-won shakes his head, carries over a steaming pot, and calls both of them to the table. Ladling the food out, he tells them the meal counts as part of the job. Then he sits down and says quite calmly that food was never meant to be eaten alone. Do-yoon eats, but only after warning that the price comes out of his wages. Moo-won puts a hand on his head, amazed that a child this size will not take a single thing for free. Scrolling his phone, Moo-won tells him to watch his route carefully on the way home. Do-yoon tells himself this is temporary work and does not quite manage to believe it. Moo-won watches him throw himself at it and says there is no need to die over a practice run. They end up eating together anyway. And the older man sighs at how stubborn one child can be. Watching Do-yoon eat like somebody is about to take it away, he wonders what this boy turns into. From then on, the routine belongs to Chu Dong-seon, Moo-won's right hand and a retired cage fighter. In the Gunilpa gym, Do-yoon slips punches coming faster than a child should be able to read. Then he sets his feet to hit back, and something behind his eyes locks on. Dong-seon has trained plenty of kids, and none of them ever looked at him like this. A straight punch comes out with everything the boy has behind it. It lands on the pad hard enough to move a grown man's arm. Dong-seon smiles, having just found out exactly what he is holding. Dong-seon hands him eggs and tells him to eat if he wants to stay standing. Do-yoon turns his own hands over and reads the calluses forming on them. Push-ups in the yard under Dong-seon's eye, with his little sister watching watching from the doorway. His arms are finished, and he keeps going anyway, which is the entire point of the exercise. Dong Sion watches a child refuse to quit and does not bother hiding how much he likes it. Between sessions, there are newspapers to deliver since training does not pay rent. Studying happens too at a table in a wrecked living room while Moo-won sleeps on the sofa. Every coin he earns goes into a plastic bottle he keeps like a private bank. Coins packed to the neck and a few folded bills, that bottle is every hour of his childhood. Years pass and the bottle stays. Now it is a high school uniform, and Do-yoon says plainly that this is where he learned what endurance actually costs. Do-yoon crosses the schoolyard pretending the whispering behind him is just weather. If his parents were alive, none of this weight would be sitting on a teenager. One long breath, and he pushes into the locker room to change for practice. Out on the pitch, he is simply better than everyone around him, and it is not close. For the first time in years, something that felt a lot like hope was starting to show up. Then the coach waves him over, on precisely the day it all comes apart. Do-yoon stops dead in the middle of the field, already knowing exactly what this conversation is. The coach asks why his form has supposedly been so poor and sluggish lately. Then he says it flatly, Do-yoon is off the roster for the next important match. Do-yoon nods once, since he has been waiting for this exact conversation for weeks. Aloud, he even agrees, of course. His body must be far too heavy. What else could it possibly be? Both of them know the problem is not his body. It is the money already sitting in the coach's pocket. Do-yoon walks to the equipment room, finished pretending any of this was ever fair. Sport used to be the one place he believed got judged honestly, and it turns out it runs on exactly the same money as everything else. A padlock closes on all of it, and he walks away from high school football without one regret. That is when a red-haired boy comes down the hallway loud and brave, leading with the word orphan. Behind him, they laugh at the funniest thing they know, which is that he has no father and no mother. The one running his mouth is Hwang Sung-hyuk, and his father is a director of Daejeong. Sung Hyuk wants to know what makes an orphan think he is somebody special around here. Still laughing, he lays it out. Do-yoon does not play, having no money and nobody to make a call for him. A finger goes toward the field. Every name on that roster was bought, and Do-yoon is the only one who did not pay. Do-yoon does not even change expression, and thanks him sincerely for confirming exactly how the team gets picked. Then he snaps the padlock shut and goes back to ignoring the entire performance. Being ignored is the one thing Sung-hyuk cannot survive, and it shows all over his face. Do-yoon keeps his back turned and refuses to give him anything at all, so the redhead slams his head into the metal locker. Now he is shouting about how badly that superior little attitude gets under his skin. All the money in the world, he says, and this orphan still never sets foot on that field. He will never be anything in life, just a parasite living on a block that pays its taxes to Daejeong. And he keeps going, jabbing a finger into the side of Do-yoon's skull with total contempt.
Then he says it out loud. Maybe that attitude is the reason nobody stayed around to raise him.
Do-yoon says absolutely nothing, and Sung-hyuk mocks him for suddenly losing his tongue. Out of patience, the redhead drives a boot into his back in the middle of the school hallway. Something goes very quiet inside Do-yoon, and he asks in a voice nobody here has heard before whether Sung-hyuk knows one thing. The real problem, he says, is walking around like a king because your father happens to be somebody's gangster. Then his forehead breaks Sung-hyuk's nose before anyone in that hallway sees him move. Red pours down the rich kid's face, and his brain simply stops working. Sung-hyuk goes down into the dirt, and Do-yoon stands over him and invites him to please keep talking exactly like that. It makes what he is about to do so much easier to live with. Do-yoon puts everything he has into a ball aimed at a boy who cannot get up. It leaves his foot like something fired rather than kicked. What he and every single person standing behind him actually are. Do-yoon tells him plainly, cowards all of them. It buries itself in the goal net hard enough for the sound to carry across the whole yard. Nobody in that yard is laughing anymore, and nobody is moving either. The coach is screaming. The boy bleeding in the dirt belongs to a Daejeong director. Do-yoon leaves him with one line. That was only a warning, and he got off very cheap. Days later, the school convenes an emergency hearing to decide what to do with him. The committee discusses the assault committed by one Do-yoon against a fellow student during practice. Their principal announces he is out of the football association and the school is removing him as well. Do-yoon asks, very calmly, why he is the only person in this room being punished. Perhaps because there's no family money behind him and nobody willing to make a phone call. He says it straight to their faces. This is happening because the other boy's name is worth something to Dae-gyeong. The counselor swallows hard and looks at the table, which is the only honest answer Do-yoon gets. Do-yoon almost smiles, since school has finally taught him something genuinely useful about how the world is run. And he walks out of that room finished asking anyone for fairness ever again. This entire city has belonged to the gangs for as long as he has been alive. They take money from the same people they claim to protect. That fake peace works like poison, and it keeps producing more people exactly like him. Walking home under a dead orange sky, he finally lets himself cry. Then he drags his sleeve across his face and deletes it. Night comes down over the block, and Do-yoon quietly starts building something. Do-yoon stops arguing with his situation and accepts that he was always going to have to walk straight through it. One look up at the sky, and there's no version of this where he steps back now. The game was rigged long before he was born, so he stops playing by its rules. A metal door covered in tags waits at the bottom of the stairs, and he takes one breath before he opens it. Everything from the corporations down to the thugs on the corners is on the other side of it. Do-yoon goes down those stairs intending to pull the whole rotten thing apart and collect on every debt. If power and force were good enough to end his school life, then power and force are the language he answers in. Moo-won looks up and cannot hide his surprise. It has been years, and the boy standing there is not the boy who left. Around the room, Gunilpa's men stop what they are doing to look at whoever just walked in. Without a word, Do-yoon drops a heavy backpack onto the living room floor, and everyone hears what is inside it. Do-yoon opens the bag, shows the bottles packed with coins, and says the amount is double what he owed. Moo-won raises an eyebrow, having no memory of lending this kid so much as one coin. Do-yoon explains the total. Every meal, every night under that roof, priced out and paid back. Moo-won pushes the money away, irritated, and tells him to leave if that is all he came for. Do-yoon's fist closes tight, and he insists the man take it, since this is the final settlement between them. Moo-won's voice drops. The boy is confusing kindness for debt, and he had better start listening. Do-yoon does not look away, and says very calmly that he actually came here with a proposal. Moo-won's gaze sharpens on the dark-haired kid, trying to work out what brought him back through that door. Then Do-yoon bows all the way down and asks Kim Moo-won to adopt him as his legitimate son. In return, he will hand the man the one thing he has wanted for years and could never take alone. Gunilpa's men go completely silent, watching a teenager hold a bow and wait for their boss to answer. The gang leader's eyes narrow. Nobody this stubborn walks in without a second reason. Years of wondering what this boy would grow into, and now he sees that only the body changed. So he pushes back. Does this kid actually have any idea what a man like him truly wants? Do-yoon answers without pausing. What Moo-won wants is Choi Diop, and through him, Dae-yeong itself, with something bright and dangerous in his eyes. He promises to deliver that man the next time they meet. Promises are not something he breaks, he says, and he learned that rule from Moo-won. The gangster smirks. This kid appears out of nowhere, uses formal language, and makes impossible claims. So why keep showing up here, Moo-won asks, when he knows exactly what answer he is going to get. Do-yoon points at the floor beneath him and says he came because this was always going to happen. Moo-won sighs like a tired man and wonders aloud why fate picked him for this particular job. And Do-yoon asks the only question that matters. Who else is there? Who else could ever hold him? Nobody but Moo-won can bring down Dae-gyeong, and Do-yoon says it like a fact. The gang leader asks what could possibly make a teenager believe something that insane. Do-yoon smiles slightly since the answer is simple. He watched them do it once already. There was a night he remembers exactly, and a hallway in the district administration building. The memory opens on Moo-won and his best men set and waiting, dressed for something ugly. Do-yoon thought he was about to see 5 men have a conversation in a dark corridor. What he actually saw was 2 of them walk into an entire crowd of armed criminals. Dozens of Dae-yeong's men had gathered there to corner the Gunilpa crew and finish it. Dong-seon and Taegyu went straight into them, fists and whatever they could pick up off the floor. Rain hammered the pavement outside while the enemies were taken apart without a shred of mercy. Every punch landed exactly where it was aimed, and men who had never lost dropped one after another. Surrounded and outnumbered, the 2 of them ran that hallway, choking and dropping opponents in sequence. Dong-seon swung heavy scrap like a tool and crushed whatever resistance was still standing. The invaders were screaming in real terror, with no chance at all, and every one of them aware of it. Do-yoon remembers that Moo-won's men never gave a single one of them room to run. Watching through a crack in the wall with his sister beside him, Do-yoon burned that night into his memory. The light in his eyes on that cold night was the moment he decided how he intended to survive. Those silhouettes standing over the wreckage became the boy's permanent definition of power. Back in the present, Moo-won leans leans his face on his hand and asks whether that fight really went like that. Bong Tae-gyu and Chu Dong-seon listen without moving, filling the room just by standing in it. Han Si-young-jae speaks up and places it. That was the night Choi Diop sent men to welcome them to the district. Moo-won performs exhaustion, says he has heard enough explanations, and tells the boy he can go. Do-yoon turns toward the door and says, perfectly calmly, that he only came to deliver a message. Pulling the office door open, he states that he is not stopping, whatever anyone decides. Then the door slams, and the room he leaves behind is thick with things nobody wants to say. Taegyu breaks the silence and asks the boss straight out what he intends to do about that offer. The kid cannot be trusted, he warns, and a small exiled crew like theirs cannot afford that risk. Stretched on the sofa, Moo-won smiles a little, since it has been a long time since his partner argued with him. And it is not only about them. He says no organization on Earth is going to tame that boy. Eyes closed, he laughs that the little maniac could at least have waited 2 more years. Do-yoon was raised like a son, and the son was never once expected to come back with terms. Moo-won can still hear the small voice from years ago saying he wanted to grow up exactly like him. Back then, a little kid ran through the room announcing his dream to be strong and respected like this man. Moo-won sighs into the sofa, and whatever just walked out of here was never an ordinary child. Moo-won stands up slowly, repeating out loud the words of the boy who now wants his name. An old cardboard box comes down off the shelf, and it has been a very long time since he opened it. Inside are the pieces of another life, including a school graduation photo of a boy. Out of it comes a badly crumpled sheet of paper that once decided the direction of everything. A cargo truck, a bad night, and a crash. That is where Moo-won's story turned. Portraits banked with flowers, a funeral, and a grief with nothing to do with gangs at all. Kim Moo-won stands at that funeral in a black suit and stares at nothing, while executives behind him discuss his division's failures. An employee walks the corridors of Hoopsung Company, knowing exactly what got neglected. Directors with red, threatening eyes talk about the billions his mistake cost every other department. The official notice arrives. His new management post is a small, half-dead office in the worst district available. Without one word of regret, he packs his things and walks out of corporate headquarters for good. His most loyal men come with him, and manager Kim Moo-won heads for the suburbs. Their silhouettes fill a dusty room, the office that will run the entire Ganjang-dong region. Moo-won carries his cardboard box in and gives the place a sarcastic little smile. His men start clearing the wreck, hauling in a heavy sofa, making something out of nothing. That night, he walks into an empty apartment alone, holding a box that contains his whole past. Reading the transfer order again, he feels the exact weight of what they did to him. Then his hand closes, and the official paper is crushed into nothing in one fist. In the dark, he sits on the sofa, staring at the crumpled paper on the floor, saying absolutely nothing. His pale eyes burn in that darkness, and he was never going to accept it quietly. Back in the present, Moo-won lets out a long breath and rests his hand on that same cardboard box. Only to himself does he admit it. This boy has a talent for occupying his thoughts from every direction. A firm knock breaks the silence of the office and pulls the leader's attention to the door. Si-young-jae announces himself from the corridor and asks to come in. It opens slowly, and Si-young-jae walks in with the calm expression he always brings to bad news. Medicine is what he brought, he says, but the boss has clearly already started drinking without him. So he sits on the floor with the bottles and asks casually what exactly happened around here. Si-young-jae reports it. The boy was expelled after putting the sons of rival gangsters on the floor. Moo-won passes him a drink and agrees that Do-yoon detonating was only ever a matter of time. Moo-won asks whether the fight was about protecting the little sister, and the question is not casual. It was, and Si-young-jae adds that Do-yoon was never like the other kids. Then he asks what the boss plans to do, because that boy can no longer be hidden from anybody. A kid that determined, he warns, will land somewhere far worse if they refuse him. Better that Gunilpa takes him in now, before somebody else does something unforgivable to him. Moo-won drinks and asks whether the rest of the crew sees it the same way. Dong-seon, he mentions, keeps pushing to train the boy properly and turn him into a professional fighter. Si-young-jae doubts Do-yoon would ever accept that, since the kid was not built to be anyone's muscle. The right move, he argues, is simply to stay close enough that the boy does not disappear into this world. Moo-won laughs that his partner has always been unbearably reasonable about everything. What he really wants to know is what is going on inside that head and how long this was planned. Moo-won turns serious and asks who is watching the boy's movements right now. Si-young-jae already has the phone out, offering to send Yeom Do-jin to bring him back in. Moo-won nods and tells him to move fast, before the boy decides to go looking for Choi Diop Diop himself. The call goes out and rings across the city. Dujin picks up and confirms he is parked outside the sibling's house. Then he tells the boss to come in person. He has just spotted the kid walking alone down a dark street. Hood up, Du-yoon moves through the night with a red glow behind his eyes and a very specific destination. In a bar across the district, gangsters drink and beg their boss not to leave his own promotion party early. Their leader compliments the place and tells the useless lot of them to keep drinking without him. Outside, 3 of his men talk about how enormous Dae-young is and how strict the boss has become. Nobody, he assures them, would ever dare come at him from behind in his own territory. Choi Diop steps out complaining about headquarters, while a subordinate thanks him for the opportunity. Diop walks off cursing, since running a crew in a rotting district like Guncheong has been nothing but humiliation. Alone in the dark, he complains about the years he has burned in a place the corporation forgot. Being demoted to the worst neighborhood in the region is a wound that never once healed. Diop hates every step of this street and hates pretending to be some small-time local heavy. The corporate lies enrage him, and so does the transfer back to headquarters they keep promising. Then he ducks into a dark corner of the street to relieve himself, still chewing on all of it. Out loud he curses, wondering how much more the men upstairs intend to dump on his shoulders. Things worked better, he decides. Back when the local police still hit people, Diop zips up and tries to shove the whole subject out of his head. Footsteps make him jump. He pulls out a cigarette and demands to know who is there. His subordinate steps out with a lighter, saying the boss drank too much and he would rather smoke beside him. Diop takes the light, calls him a kid, and suggests one more round before they go. Then a voice out of nowhere says the gang leader's name, and the friendly little moment dies. Both men turn toward the dark end of the alley, and there is Du-yoon already waiting for them. Du-yoon starts walking toward them slowly, checking the time on his wristwatch as he comes. Du-yoon says the name again, Choi Diop, with a red gleam behind his eyes that stops being funny fast. Diop lights his cigarette without concern and asks what a boy wants, dragging himself all the way out here. His subordinate squares up and offers to handle this irritating little problem himself. Diop waves him off and decides to walk up to the kid personally. Stopping in front of Du-yoon, he takes a long drag and asks exactly who he thinks he is. A career criminal sizes him up and concludes with contempt that this is just some child. Brats, he complains, should not be out on the street at this hour ruining a working adult's night. Then the threat, get lost, kid, while the alcohol is still doing the thinking for him. Once he sobers up, Diop stops settling things politely. The two of them stand there in a dark, silent alley, and the air goes thick with what is coming. Du-yoon has not moved an inch, and Diop asks with open contempt whether he genuinely intends to stay. Du-yoon answers coldly. He is here because something that belongs to him is still in this district. Looking straight at Diop, he proposes the two of them settle it between themselves. Diop finds that hilarious and repeats the word back at him, dripping with disbelief. Du-yoon explains what he actually came for, a justification, one solid enough to start a war on. Nobody in this business swings first anymore. He says, with the corporations watching everything, Diop mocks him. Since when did criminals start caring about the paperwork? Du-yoon adjusts his watch and repeats that he walked into this alley for one thing, and that thing is a reason. 3 years he worked inside Dae-young's businesses, he says, and never saw even 20% of the wages. Wage theft, documented, real, and by the rules of this world, that is a perfectly valid justification. Diop laughs when he hears it is about money and warns the kid, this is the wrong man to bring it to. Collect that debt, he says, from whoever actually hired him. Stop puffing yourself up over pocket change, Diop tells him, and get out of this alley. Would he have walked all the way out here, Du-yoon asks, if pocket change were really what this was about? That irritates Diop, who calls him insane and demands to know if the kid even understands what a justification is. His face twists with impatience at the sheer nerve of someone who refuses to be afraid of him. A real justification, he shouts, costs dozens of lives, sometimes hundreds. His lit cigarette hits the ground and whatever patience he had goes with it. Does this brat honestly believe a gang war gets declared over a handful of coins? Diop warns him there is nothing in this alley and nothing in this district that is going to help him. A finger goes to his own gang's mark painted on the wall. There is no one in this district who will stand behind a kid. This much patience is unusual for him, he admits, and Du-yoon is the first person in years to talk to him without fear. Du-yoon ignores every word of it and observes that the man talks far too much when he drinks. Scratching his head, he concludes out loud that his own stolen wages will never carry what he has planned. So Du-yoon looks him in the eye and asks what he thinks about orphans being trafficked out of this neighborhood. The scene falls back years into a bare room where a boy is reading and footsteps footsteps are coming up the hall. Something wrong out in the corridor makes him go completely still, listening. Outside, men are complaining that this neighborhood is a terrible place to stash a stolen child. One of them shoulders into the dark room, laughing, asking if they really landed fresh merchandise. Already celebrating the price, he barely hears the child curled on the bed asking who they are. The kidnapper takes the boy's head in his hand and tells him he was simply unlucky tonight. The other one says not to mark the kid, gag the mouth, tie the wrists, keep him clean. Fine, says the first, pulling out the tape. And this is hardly their first time. That is when young Do-yoon walks in, and both kidnappers see immediately that he is not a neighbor. Do-yoon goes at them without thinking. A flying kick straight into one of them, and the room turns. A boy loses that fight fast, and one of the men complains about what a filthy neighborhood this is. He straightens his jacket, muttering that these days even street brats have forgotten the rules. His partner drags the heavy case toward the door. Good money tonight and time to be gone. They leave in a hurry before anyone sees them, and Do-yoon stays on the wet floor where they left him. The one in front stops at the doorway and looks back with a slow, thoughtful, ugly expression. His partner glances at the boy on the ground and asks what they should do about the witness. Their leader puts a boot into him without a flicker of feeling and says there's nothing to worry about. Smiling, he adds that he is not in the mood tonight to deal with disposing of a body. So the boy stays unconscious in the gutter while they walk away with the other child. That is the trade. Men out of Guncheng 2 taking the abandoned kids of Guncheng 1 and selling them. Back in the present, Do-yoon says that is a justification and it is Gunilpa's to use. Diop's face changes. This teenager knows the entire thing. Cynicism is the only cover left. Nobody could ever prove an accusation that old. Do-yoon just smiles without a sound, and the man in front of him is already finished. Diop understands it too. The time for talking in this alley has run out. Eyes burning red, he warns that he cannot let this kid walk out of here alive. Diop attacks first, a punch with genuine speed and genuine weight behind it. Do-yoon slips it, and the fight explodes out into the street. Everything he has goes into one straight punch, and there's nothing but hatred behind it. It buries itself in Diop's stomach and folds a grown criminal backward. Diop howls, half pain and half fury, feeling exactly how accurate that shot was. Do-yoon reads the opening and comes off the ground with his fist already cocked. The knee lands square in Diop's chest and puts him into the asphalt. His eyes go wide. He has just been overpowered by a teenager, and he knows it. Choi Diop lies stretched out on the road, while Do-yoon looks down at him without a trace of feeling. Do-yoon checks his wristwatch and remarks, unimpressed, that his opponent talks far too much. His eyes burn red in the dark, with step 1 finished and finished on schedule. Diop drags himself upright, wipes the red off his mouth, and says he understands the justification now. Diop sets his stance with his own eyes lit, and the boy has finally earned his full attention. Then he charges, and a brutal punch catches Do-yoon flush in the face out of nowhere. Do-yoon's head snaps sideways, and he plants his feet, since this just became a fight to the end. His hood falls back off a bloodied face, and he warns Diop coldly not to drag this out. Seriously, he adds, he doubts the two of them will ever get another meeting after tonight. Do-yoon catches the next punch in the air, and Choi Diop simply cannot process what just happened. Smiling without warmth, he tells him it is over, and the old criminal's eyes fill with terror. A fistful of Diop's hair, and he says, it is time for the legendary hammerhead shark to lose for the second time. That one word, second, drains the color out of him, since only one man alive ever did that to him. Do-yoon's eyes burn in the dark as he sets up the last blow. Diop's head goes into the asphalt, and Do-yoon declares that Guncheng 1 belongs to him now. Diop swears this neighborhood will be erased from the map and screams at him to let go. Something cracks in the dark, and a low, annoyed voice says he did warn about this before. Kim Moo-won comes forward dragging his feet, promising exactly what happens if this man touches his son again. His eyes glow red in the snow, as he explains that he is fully prepared to take the man's eyes out. He says it a second time, with curses in it, so nobody mistakes it for a figure of speech. On the phone, Moo-won is told about a company dinner and asks where the meeting is being held. The address out near the highway is confirmed, and he ends the call knowing exactly what is waiting. An old flip phone snaps shut hard enough to close the conversation twice over. Chu Dong-seon, his right hand, wonders aloud whether that boy, Won Do-yoon, is finally going to show up. Dong-seon moves to follow his boss out and gets stopped before he takes a single step. step. Without turning around, Moo-won orders him to stay in the office, and it is not a suggestion. It is nothing, the boss says dismissively. Just a small matter in Guncheng's second district. Dong-seon bows deeply and wishes his boss a safe return, and means every word of it. Boots slide on wet asphalt, and the memory of that old fight comes back with them. Moo-won walks through falling snow, remembering with contempt the warning he once gave this district. The criminal in front of him is shaking, remembering the promise that his eyes would come out if he ever touched the boy. Moo-won remembers being asked why he picked that particular kid out of all of them. No logical answer ever came to him for taking that particular child in, so he screams it instead. He protects the boy because that boy is his son, and that is the whole reason. The real reason, he admits, was the look in the kid's eyes, sharp enough to frighten a grown criminal. Standing over Diop's fallen men, Moo-won says it plainly. Do-yoon is a child, and he will be treated like one. Hands in his pockets, the Gunilpa boss looks down at Choi Diop and tells him to get a grip on reality. Diop spits back that the man is talking nonsense, since there are no children in their business. Moo-won's teeth grind. Diop is the one who needs to come to his senses before this gets worse for him. Taking hold of Diop's arm, he explains what happens to people who talk nonsense at him. Moo-won slips the counter, and Choi Diop screams that he is an idiot right in the middle of it. Guard up, Moo-won mentions that this time he will not be aiming for the eyes. Very calmly, he promises to take the man's ear off if the cheap provocations continue. Diop charges anyway with his teeth bared because backing down is not in him. The two of them trade fast and vicious shots, turning that quiet alley into something loud. Diop's face changes. Nobody reacts that fast, and he was not prepared for it. A body shot lands at full speed and finds exactly where it was aimed. Then a punch to the face sends red across the wall behind him. Choi Diop's eyes go wide in total shock as he feels the full weight of what just hit him. Moo-won gives him no room to breathe and puts together a sequence with nothing wasted in it. His eyes burn red above a grim smile, and some part of him has genuinely missed this. Diop swings back and shouts that he lost everything because of what somebody else did. Their fists collide with enough force to flash white at the point of contact. Diop's whole face strains as he tries to hold up under pressure he cannot match. Moo-won drops under the next punch with impossible ease and lets it pass over his head. Then he comes up, fist rising, everything he has going toward Diop's chin. The straight lands clean, and Diop spits from the shock of the impact as it throws him backward. Both of them are staggering, and both of them reset their guards without a word. They come at each other again in a full sprint, ready to end it on this exchange. Moo-won's punch smashes into Diop's face and blows a shockwave through the smoke in the alley. Young Do-yoon watches all of it from the shadows with his eyes wide open. Choi Diop lifts his head with difficulty and feels the full weight of what has just happened to him. Moo-won looks down at him with red burning in his eye, and this fight was over before it started. One last strike cuts the air and declares this street fight finished. Moo-won plants his foot to steady himself after landing it perfectly. Diop throws himself backward out of range, still refusing to eat the final shot in that brawl. Panting and badly marked, he curses, having catastrophically underestimated who he was fighting. Then the fury spills out. Does Moo-won really not know the true reason he got demoted? Moo-won says nothing at all, and the red glow in his eye is enough to quiet an entire street. Then ice cold, Moo-won asks whether all this talking means Diop has finally gotten scared to fight. Down on the asphalt from his own fight, Do-yoon shouts at Diop too, since he is not finished either. Diop bares his teeth and screams that he has waited 10 long years for exactly this night. Forward at full speed he comes, swearing that this time he takes his enemy apart with no chance to guard. The legendary hammerhead shark stands up again, and every bit of what made him feared is still in there. His fists close and his eyes lock on, and he is about to throw everything he has left. The two of them collide, punches crossing, the impact throwing light across the whole alley. Moo-won's eyes burn, and he does not intend to give up 1 millimeter until this man is done. Young Do-yoon watches that display of raw strength with his eyes wide and his mouth open. Diop's ruined face snaps backward as the finishing blow goes straight through his guard. Diop hits the wet asphalt hard, and Kim Moo-won is left standing alone under the streetlight. Moo-won takes one breath and looks down at him with exactly the same calm he had before it started. Bending down, he takes hold of him and repeats that he warned him about this once already. Then, with real fury, he leans into Diop's face and promises that this time the ear actually comes off. The scream that follows is pure agony. agony, and it carries all the way down the alley. Something dark hits the ground, and the promise Moo-won made has now been kept in full. Do-yoon sits and thinks that even without knowing the whole story, these fights always end the same way. A man who built a reputation on mutilating opponents has just had it done to him. His own ear came off in the end, and there is a kind of justice in that too clean to argue with. Do-yoon nods slowly, since the blonde man in front of him always does what needs doing. Moo-won spits out what is left in his mouth. He keeps his promises, and he makes sure nobody forgets them. Sitting on the asphalt, Do-yoon understands the result of that fight was fixed from the first second. That kind of relentless, even-handed brutality is exactly what makes this man a leader. A hand goes out to him, and Do-yoon is certain now that this gangster is the only man in the city fit to run it. And if he stands beside him, everything Do-yoon has ever planned finally becomes possible. Moo-won, mouth bleeding, waves the hand away and asks what the kid is still doing here. They shake on it instead, and the man asks why the boy keeps staring at him like that. Do-yoon points at his face and informs him coldly that there is still red running down his chin. Moo-won wipes it and asks if it stopped. Obviously not, Do-yoon says. There is still a mess all over him. Moo-won decides to head back and tells the boy to come along. But Do-yoon asks for one more moment. Out of patience, Moo-won says he is going on ahead, and the kid can find his own way home. Crouched in the dark on the asphalt, Do-yoon reaches for something that fell there during the fight. In his stained hands is Choi Diop's severed ear, and his face does not change at all. Back in the office in the present, they are still talking about the boy collecting that old debt. From the sofa, Moo-won asks if he really did all that just to manufacture a justification. Then he laughs, wondering out loud when teenagers got this bold. Scratching his head, he is genuinely unsure whether this kid is a strategist or an idiot who enjoys danger. Either way, he concludes the correct decision is to cut him loose. Do-yoon answers immediately and tells his leader not to waste any more time thinking about it. Focused and completely certain, he states that he has already fulfilled the promise he made. Moo-won nods and mentions the rumors. Choi Diop is finally being recalled to Daejeong headquarters. Eyes closed, he advises the boy to walk away from all this and go back to school. Somewhere in Guncheong-won, he says, there has to be at least one high school that will still take him. Red flares behind Do-yoon's eyes as he rejects the whole idea and asks why he would do that now. Reaching into his coat pocket, he calmly informs the leader that the payment is already here. His hand opens on Choi Diop's severed ear, and he offers it up as the proof that was demanded. An ear, he points out reasonably, is part of a head, so the promise has technically been kept. Then Do-yoon raises his fist and declares that he belongs to Gunilpa now, as Kim Moo-won's legitimate son. Moo-won lets out a very long breath and puts his head down, unable to process this child's nerve. A hand goes to his temple, and he is visibly stressed by what a teenager has just created in his office. Since the boy will not fill the silence, Moo-won asks him seriously what the real reason is. Why does he want this life so badly? And why does he specifically want to be his son? Do-yoon straightens up and says he only carries two goals with him. And here's the first. Do-yoon intends to bring down the men who run this city completely, with nothing left standing. With something black behind his eyes, he promises to drag every one of them somewhere worse than the gutter he came from. The road there does not matter to him, and neither does what it costs him to walk it. Then he floors the man. His second wish is to put his father at the top of this city. His smile is small and certain, and that conquest is simply the next item on his list. Chu Dong-seon appears in the office doorway, leaning on the metal frame, saying absolutely nothing. Later, Do-yoon opens his own front door a crack and is confused to find the fighter standing outside it. Dong-seon turns his head sideways and gives one nod, which means follow me. The two of them walk together through the quiet, dark streets of the neighborhood. Do-yoon breaks the silence and asks whether they are heading into that district again. They stop at a small lit grocery store on an empty residential street. Dong-seon tears open a blue popsicle and holds it out to him. Do-yoon eyes the thing suspiciously and asks why the sudden kindness and whether the gang sent him. Dong-seon just hands it over and says this was always going to happen. Do-yoon bites into the ice and admits flatly that no matter how hard he fights it, he ends up back in that place. Dong-seon listens to all of it, and his face turns serious about where this kid is heading. His advice is blunt. Without an enormous reason, stay as far from this world as it is possible to get. He claps him on the back and admits the boy has a real gift for fighting. Do-yoon does not know what to do with the compliment, and Dong-seon admits he himself himself walked away from this life eventually. Working on his own popsicle, he tells the boy to think about his future and leave adult problems to adults. Do-yoon squares up and says, seriously, that he is done living that way. If he does not act himself right now, then nothing in his life is ever going to change. Dong-seon looks at him hard and reminds him he was never taught to fight so he could solve everything with his fists. Do-yoon looks away, mildly irritated, and mutters that he knows every one of those rules. Then, holding the popsicle, he points out that what the boss and the older men are planning is revenge. Another bite, and he concludes that this is precisely why he has to do the same thing. Dong-seon stands with his back to him, taking in the sheer weight of it. Do-yoon jabs a thumb at his own chest and repeats that revenge is the only thing driving him. Dong-seon warns him the orders have already gone up the chain, and after tonight there is no way back. Dong-seon listens without a word as the boy calmly states that Kim Moo-won is his real father now. Back in the present, Moo-won's hands close on the official report and crush it against the desk. The ruined paper goes into the office bin, which is his answer to the rules. A knock. Someone announces themselves and asks if Dong-seon is back from his errand. Dong-seon bows at the door, and Moo-won immediately asks whether Do-yoon has gone home. Walking in, the fighter confirms it and promises the boy got back safely. Moo-won lets his head fall back on the sofa and mutters about how far this has gone with that kid. Hands behind his back, Dong-seon works up the nerve to ask the boss why he did what he did. Moo-won looks away and admits out loud that the boy will never officially be his son, whatever paper says otherwise. Then his eyes widen. Moo-won tells him the kid intends to take on all of De-young by himself. Moo-won jabs a finger at the room, knowing full well one teenager just rewrote everybody's plans. A finger goes to the trophy left sitting on the living room floor, which nobody can argue with. Do-yoon kept his promise and cornered him with it, so now Moo-won has no choice but to move. A long breath goes out of him, and he accepts it. The war has just been declared in his own office by a child. Dong-seon lowers his eyes and confirms that he now fully understands how serious this has become. Privately, he knows the arrival of an adopted son is going to change the direction of this entire crew. Moo-won's jaw tightens, and none of the danger ahead has gone anywhere. Dong-seon breaks the silence and asks what happens to the crew's original plan. A hand comes down on the arm of the sofa. Nothing about the plan changes. Red flares in Moo-won's eyes as he adds that now the rival has been hit. They move faster, not slower. Climbing the stairs of his block that night, Do-yoon breathes out and tries to bring himself down, then he smiles sideways to himself, since that gangster is a genuinely extraordinary and fair man. The promise he made comes back to him, to put his new father at the top of this city, whatever it takes. That goal, he decides, is the thing his entire life now points at. In his head, Moo-won is still asking him dryly whether he thinks every problem solves this easily. Do-yoon had smirked and said no. Obviously, nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Moo-won remembers his own shock when a teenager announced he was becoming his son starting that day. Do-yoon had stared straight at him and asked whether he was wrong for being this stubborn. Moo-won had pushed back. Becoming somebody's father is not a decision anyone makes lightly. Raising a child, he said, takes everything you have, and it still never feels like enough. Do-yoon listened to all of it in silence with the same cold, focused expression. So Moo-won asked, knowing exactly what that weight is, does he still want to go through with this madness? Without hesitating, Do-yoon said that is precisely why he chose to take the man's family name. Every consequence of that choice he promised to carry the moment he walked into that office. Hearing something that mature out of a teenager, the crime boss had no answer at all. Half smiling, he gave in and said that justification was good enough to let the boy into his life. The two of them stood face to face and sealed an agreement that changed the whole neighborhood's future. Kim Moo-won put a hand on Do-yoon's head and accepted him as his son and his partner both. And Do-yoon knows that if the man had refused him coldly, he would not have had the right to complain. Back in the present, he stops at his own gate, with no idea how to tell his sister any of this. It swings open, and his sister is standing right there asking why it is taking him so long to say it. He jumps back, completely caught out, and stutters her name, since she just took 10 years off him. Arms folded, she informs him she already knows he asked the local gang boss to adopt him.
Do-yoon
Scratches his head, deeply awkward, and she asks whether he really thought she did not hear all that. She looks at him calmly, and it turns out she is not angry about her brother's enormous news. She just asks him directly whether it went the way he wanted it to go. Looking away, embarrassed, he admits that his arrangement with the gang leader worked out well enough. off. Good, she says, since there is nothing worse than doing something for the first time and having it fall apart immediately. Then she turns toward the door and tells him to get inside already. Dinner is made. Do-yoon watches his sister walk away and is genuinely thrown by how easily she took it. Quietly, he thanks her and follows her in, carrying a relief he did not expect to feel. Night settles over the siblings' house, and the two of them step into this new life beside a gang. Next morning, every senior member of Gunilpa sits around the table with Do-yoon among them. Dong-seon breaks the silence to say the mood is a little tense with the boys sitting there. From the sofa, Moo-won says they had all better start getting used to him. Moo-won fixes on him and asks whether he cleaned up everything he left behind in that alley. Do-yoon confirms it. Only his sister knew, so there was nothing else to bury. The boss leans forward and tells him to spit out whatever plan he has been building in private. Do-yoon faces a room full of gangsters and says the fastest way to end Dae-young needs something reckless. Then he lays out an infiltration plan so precise that nobody at that table says a word. Moo-won sighs with his arms spread, admitting he really was curious how this kid's mind worked. Then his face hardens and he tells him flatly that this insane tactic is never happening. Small plans can afford mistakes. He says big ones have to put everybody's survival above the prize. If all 6 people in this room do not walk out alive at the end of it, he will not authorize a thing. There's no rush. Moo-won says they take the district the slow way, exactly as originally planned. Seong-jae backs the decision instantly, which is exactly what he is there for. Then the office door explodes inward and cuts the entire conversation in half. Armed strangers pile in loud and stupid, demanding to know if this is the right office. They plant themselves in Gunilpa's doorway like they own it, faces set to threatening. Their leader grabs the door handle and asks it again, louder, as if that helps. They sneer at the people already in the room and congratulate themselves on finding the rival headquarters. Before anyone can react, one of Gunilpa's heaviest hitters is already crossing the room. Bong Tae-gyu leaves the floor and drives his first punch straight into a criminal's face. His eyes burn red and every word out of his mouth is a curse, with mercy nowhere on the table. The men in the doorway realize far too late how fast this just became. A punch lands flush on the first invader's jaw and sends red across the room. Tae-gyu goes through them, throwing bodies into the office wall like furniture. Fist clenched and eyes lit. He lines up whoever is stupid enough to come next. A swing gets blocked and answered with a straight that ends the man. Then a flying knee folds the next one before he can even raise his arms. Sliding past a bat with something close to style, he puts 2 more on the floor without breaking stride. Another straight punch lands and sends a thug staggering backward with nothing left in his legs. Tae-gyu pivots hard on the floor and sets up the next shot to clear out what remains. A spinning kick catches a bald henchman across the head and drops him where he stands. The whole crew is on the floor and Do-yoon just watches it happen without moving. Tae-gyu goes after the last man still standing. That thug's eyes go wide with pure panic as he looks at everyone he came in with. Then a right hand goes straight through the middle of his face and breaks his nose. He hits the office floor, and Tae-gyu's demolition of that entire crew is finished. On the sofa, Moo-won has watched the whole thing without changing position or expression. Seong-jae and Do-yoon watch just as calmly, since nothing here worried anyone. Beaten flat, the invaders' leader puts a hand up and begs them to stop. Moo-won speaks quietly and tells Tae-gyu to stop and let the man breathe. Holding the man by the collar, Tae-gyu stops his fist in midair the instant his boss says so. His hand comes down slowly, eyes still locked on the man hanging from his grip. Moo-won waves it off. This lot are far too weak to be any real danger. Seong-jae asks the interesting question, why would anyone invade this office at all? Stammering, the fallen man explains, they saw everything that happened earlier that night. His whole crew watched the great Choi Diop get taken apart in the street. Seong-jae asks dryly whether they came here to avenge their fallen colleague. Then, the crew leader waves his hands in denial, desperate to fix the misunderstanding before Tae-gyu resumes. Dropping into a full bow, he admits the truth. He came to beg Gunilpa to take them in. They are small, unaffiliated, and offering unconditional surrender. Seong-jae repeats the phrase back, unconditional surrender, trying to find the catch in it. Do-yoon explains that Gunilpa's first move was always supposed to be taking Guncheong-dong. In the second zone, he adds, comes free, so everything hinged on breaking Choi Diop. Seong-jae asks whether an organization the size of Dae-young really hands over territory for nothing. Not for a second does he believe it, and he says the rivals would never roll over that politely. So Do-yoon looks at him and asks him to work out what reason Dae-young would have to keep it. The district map goes down on the table. The neighborhood is worthless ground nobody actually wants. Do-yoon walks through Daegyong's competing interests and shows the area only ever served as a lookout post. With their district boss gone, there is no longer a single reason for them to guard that ground. Do-yoon adjusts his watch and says the leftover local crews are then left with exactly one option. Seong-jae nods slowly and finishes it for him, bow, or get swept off the map. And that Do-yoon says is why he went after Choi Diop, to hand every one of them a reason to kneel. On a wall under the night sky, the silhouettes of those small-time criminals are already gathering. Everyone who ever saw how dangerous Choi Diop was also just watched him lose. Fist closed. Do-yoon says they take that territory either way, whatever anybody chooses. The whole plan was built to absorb the second district, not to fight for it. If it holds, round one is won without a single casualty on their side. Seong-jae watches him in silence, genuinely wondering what it is like inside that head. Do-yoon allows himself one small smile, since the timing on all of this is perfect. Across the room, he catches his adopted father's eye, and neither of them has to say anything. Moo-won narrows his pale eyes, studying how completely unsurprised the boy is by this surrender. On the floor, the beaten men stay bowed and keep begging for their lives. Moo-won scratches his head, visibly bored, and lets out a very long sigh. Seong-jae comes over and formally asks what they are supposed to do with this pile of volunteers. They came begging, Moo-won says with a shrug, so there's not much choice but to take them. They are accepted into the gang, and then the conditions come, very clear and very unpleasant. They stay in the second district only, and the moment anything they promised fails, the arrangement ends. The men bow low, relieved and grateful, and swear to earn their place. Moo-won points at their leader and puts him in charge of the remnants, reporting directly to Seong-jae. The battered man accepts on the spot and promises he will not disappoint his new boss. With another tired sigh, Moo-won waves a hand at all of them to get out of his office. The new recruits bow again and back out of the meeting room under everyone's eyes. The door shuts firmly, and that strange, tense visit is over. Gunilpa's senior members stay in the middle of the room, working through what comes next. Moo-won turns to Do-jin and tells him to hold his position and stay watching. Do-jin promises to keep both eyes on those traitors and let nothing slip past him. Do-yoon thinks quietly that everything is landing exactly where he put it. Then he turns serious and states that he will not be hearing any more objections from anyone. Moo-won studies him, aware that this boy's determination has already outrun every expectation in the room. Seong-jae watches him too, and there's real respect in it now for the mind behind the plan. Hae-gyu just gives him a thumbs up, which is his entire opinion on the matter. Do-jin stays quiet, which from him means complete trust in the kid's strategy. Then Dong-seon looks straight at Do-yoon and asks him to admit what he actually intends to do. Do-yoon decides to leave, says he takes the point and would rather be somewhere else right now. At the door, he glances back and warns all of them that he has preparations to make. The office door closes behind him, and that is the end of his part in this discussion. Across the city, Choi Diop walks a luxury corporate corridor with a bandage where his ear used to be. A hard breath goes out of him, since the meeting waiting for him is the one that decides everything. Stopping at a heavy wooden door, he curses, knowing his future in Daegyong is on the other side of it. His teeth grind at the memory of what a teenager did to him in that alley. Then he knocks and announces that Choi Diop has returned to report on his assignment. Into the luxurious office he steps, bowing all the way down to his superior. Greetings first, then the report, while the director behind the desk acknowledges his work. The superior asks what is urgent enough to come before the formalities. Head still down. Diop says the matter concerns the Gunsheng district. Everything points to Kim Moo-won making his move, he says, and the room goes cold. Meanwhile, Do-yoon walks calmly out of the Gunilpa office and back into the night. Do-yoon stops long enough to tell the others he has to go and start arranging his own plans. Outside, Do-yoon finally breathes out properly and tries to bring his pulse back down. Red still burning behind his eyes. He admits privately that the argument in there was close. Then he starts up the stairs toward his house, with his revenge sitting neatly at the front of his mind. Somebody up ahead shouts to wait while a group hauls their injured friend up the steps. One of them turns around, irritated and confused about being interrupted again. Do-yoon steps out of the shadows and says coldly that he came back because his message was not finished. They start shouting that the brat only got lucky the first time. Do-yoon smirks, cowards, he says, and he expected nothing else from them. One of them yells that this kid belongs to no gang at all and should show his elders respect. Do-yoon gives him a look and simply invites him to take the first first step. Red, glowing eyes lock onto him, and he asks, almost politely, whether his guard is up. The henchman charges with everything he has. Punch-loaded with rage, Do-yoon slips it so easily that the man is left standing wide open. The answer lands flush across his face and takes him off his feet. That henchman hits the ground unconscious, and everyone else there stops breathing. Do-yoon looks at his own hands and asks whether they have committed so many crimes that they no longer remember any of them. Setting his stance, he asks coldly whether not one of them recognizes his face. One of them starts sweating, and that face is not unfamiliar at all. An incident back in the first district comes back to him, and this is far worse than he thought. It comes to him fully. This is the kid who used to wreck their biggest operations. Do-yoon smiles without warmth and observes that his memory has finally started working. The henchman shakes with terror, now understanding exactly why his boss went after this kid personally. His fists clench, since the brat knows things nobody outside the crew should know. Then panic takes him and he charges, screaming that they cannot let this kid leave alive. Still shouting, he calls Do-yoon a threat that has to be erased tonight. Do-yoon moves once, and the punch goes past him like it was never aimed at all. The counter lands in the man's stomach with everything behind it. The henchman spits, and his eyes go wide as the full weight of it arrives. Then a spinning kick catches him clean and throws him down the street. Down on the asphalt he lands, and Do-yoon informs him darkly that the one ending tonight is him. His leg comes up over the man's face without a trace of hesitation. The sound that echoes down the alley is bone, and Do-yoon does not slow down for it. The rest of them saw all of it, and now not one of them can make his legs move. Do-yoon looks at him coldly and says he was the only coward working this area before their leader showed up. Turning to the others, he remarks that he does not recognize a single one of these new faces. One man points at his unconscious friend and pleads that they have nothing to do with any of the old business. That does not stop them being scum. Do-yoon says and asks whether they plan to disobey orders too. A warning is what he came here to deliver. Never underestimate what his gang can do to them. From tonight, he adds with something black in his eyes, there is no room in this district for cowards. Terrified, the henchman nods and promises he will personally clean up the mess himself. Do-yoon smirks, good, someone reasonable, and then tells him he does not trust him even slightly. Leaning close to the man's ear, he advises him to keep his guard up permanently. Message delivered, he turns and walks off into the dark without hurrying. The henchman breathes out and mutters that the rival gang has picked up an actual monster. Then he tells his partner to move that body before anyone else comes down the alley. They start lifting their beaten friend, knowing they have to cut ties with their old crew tonight, and it lands on him properly. That kid knows every illegal operation his former boss ever ran. He swallows hard, since a mind like that is certainly building something much larger. Do-yoon thinks about it too. These men trafficked orphans purely to climb the ladder faster. Everything he now knows about those old kidnappings is a tool for clearing this region quicker. Do-yoon looks up at the sky and picks his next target in the 3rd district. Then he smiles, since his father and his new brothers are going to approve of this one. A noise behind the stairs stops him dead and turns his head. A crumpled envelope hits the ground, spilling school documents with his own name printed on them. The red-haired boy steps out with a bandage across his nose, laughing about how hard this dump was to find. Do-yoon turns slowly, and the look he gives him contains no surprise at all. Standing there is the son of one of Daejeong's top directors. He comes closer, sneering, asking whether this really is the kid who took down their district boss. The two of them face each other in the dark, and there is nothing between them but hatred. Sung Hyuk shouts that his good years are finished, and it is entirely Do-yoon's fault. He rages about that cold, threatening stare and refuses to be the one who looks away. Leaning in, he whispers that he will never forget this, and that he will make his life hell. Wherever Do-yoon goes, he will be hunted, and Sung Hyuk will personally take everything from him. He slams his shoulder into Do-yoon on the way past, muttering curses, choking on his own fury, while Do-yoon grinds his teeth in silence and keeps his hands down. The envelope with his school record stays lying in the street dirt where it fell. Do-yoon looks back at the house, worried about one thing only, whether his sister heard any of that. A long breath, a hand flat on his chest, and he waits for his heart to slow down. Then he pushes the gray iron gate, and it opens with a creak loud enough to wake the street. Do-yoon walks into his own yard, trying to look like nothing at all has happened. In a corporate office across town, a subordinate asks whether that aggression did not go much too far. He sets a glass jar on the table, and inside it is the severed ear of the district's former boss. The bearded director remarks that the man they broke was once an elite fighter with a national reputation. Drinking straight from the bottle, he explains they used the kid as a shield to absorb the superior's fury. Chewing on a finger, he points out that the boy who started it was a director's son, so the man who was supposed to be watching that district pays instead. Looking at the bottle, the boss admits the blame is shared between himself and the man they just sacrificed. His subordinate boxes up the jar and asks whether it should be sent in the team leader's name. The boss confirms it darkly, since only a gift this obscene will finally force his rival to move. The scene shifts to a small lit house where two siblings live. Do-yoon's sister asks him very seriously whether he really intends to test himself against the mafia. Do-yoon does not move, and he gives her one nod, which is all the confirmation she gets. She stares at him, frightened, and asks straight out whether her brother has lost his mind. She reminds him what organizations like this do to ordinary people who get in their way. Shaking, she asks whether he has forgotten that their family was destroyed by exactly these men. There is no sense in it, she argues. Nobody takes on people like that alone. Do-yoon cuts her off and tells her the truth. The enemy already knows where they live. Her eyes go wide, and that is not information anyone survives casually. For himself, he says, he has to know whether he is strong enough to protect her without anyone's help. Looking straight at her, he repeats that this is the only chance he will get to find his real limit. A heavy silence settles over the little kitchen table, and neither of them says anything for a long moment. She lowers her eyes and says that even so, she will not let him walk into that alone. She begs him to go to the gang's strongest men and asks them to stand with him. Do-yoon says nothing at all, and just looks at his sister with something very serious behind his face. Then he stands up, chair scraping, and says that either way this fight is going to happen. On his way to the door, he smiles slightly and tells her he is taking that advice as permission. She gasps, since her own words have just been turned into his exit. Do-yoon turns back one last time and tells her that from now on, she lives at their adopted father's house. She watches him go with worry and stubbornness fighting on her face. Through the lit window, she can be seen alone in the room gathering the papers off the floor. She picks up the crumpled envelope and turns it over, and the weight of all of it arrives at once. Then something stops her. Her brother used the word father about the leader of a criminal gang. A few tears land silently on the wooden floor, one after another. And then she breaks completely, alone in an empty room, terrified of what is going to happen to him. A man in a suit walks slowly down the dark street as night finishes falling over the block. His eyes catch the light with something genuinely wrong behind them. Inside, his sister sits by herself with no idea at all that anyone is out there. Through the back window, he watches her and whispers to himself, planning it. A defenseless girl, he notes, is going to make excellent bait. On a desk in a Daeyoung office, reports and documents lie scattered across the surface. The team leader drums his fingers on the papers, working through exactly how bad this has become. The most trusted of them are gathered to put together something fast against the district's rivals. A dark-haired subordinate warns that Do-yoon will never bow to their orders. Another admits that the leftover rival crew's turning on them was an unpleasant surprise for everybody. The bearded boss stays completely silent, processing every new complication at once. Then he makes the call and orders his men to move the entire attack schedule forward. They listen to the new instructions without a sound, every face set and focused. Delaying that invasion, he warns, has stopped being caution and become suicide. A fist comes down on the table, an answer is coming soon, and the 3rd district has to be theirs before it does. The meeting runs fast under the dim light of that back room, while the offensive takes shape. One subordinate asks nervously whether changing the timetable this suddenly will not create serious problems. The boss gives him the picture. A stone already rolling does far more damage to whoever steps in front of it, so they move before it picks up any more speed. His men do not entirely follow the logic, but nobody says so. He brings his fist down and repeats that speed is the only safe option left to them. In another dark room, a plain box holding a glass jar is set down on a metal table. The jar and the thing inside it catch the low light of a luxury office. A calloused hand closes on the cardboard hard enough to crush the edges flat. Choi Diop opens the package, sees what they sent him, and starts to shake. The veins come up on his neck, and his eyes burn red with hatred he cannot control. teeth clenched. He curses the man who did this, since only a lunatic makes a move this bold. Then a hand goes to his head, and he has walked straight into a provocation he should have seen coming. Raj takes him, and the glass jar bursts in his bare hands. The remains hit the office wall and shatter across the room. The shards in the metal lid roll to a stop, and that expensive silence comes back. An expensive dress shoe comes down firmly on the broken glass scattered over the floor. The heavy wooden door bangs open, and everyone in the room jumps. Hwang Sung-hyuk walks in with his head down, visibly terrified of his own father. The director slams both hands on the desk and demands to know how his son failed to hold that district. Sung-hyuk swallows and stands there taking it, never once lifting his eyes off the floor. A soft knock breaks the tension, and a subordinate announces himself from the corridor. The old criminal opens the door slowly, and the redhead spins around, startled. Relief goes through him, since an interruption might buy him a few minutes out of this. The director rounds on the door and demands to know who gave anybody permission to come in. Choi Diop bows deeply and apologizes immediately for interrupting a private conversation. The boss drops back into his leather chair, sighs at the ceiling, and asks what is so urgent. Still bowed, Diop makes an unusual request, authorization to operate alone for a few days. The director looks at the two men in front of his desk and weighs every part of it. His eyes narrow, and he asks straight out whether this has anything to do with Kim Moo-won. At that name, the red-haired son breaks into a cold sweat, now seeing how large this really is. Diop confirms it seriously and says he has received an invitation he cannot politely refuse. The mafia boss stares at him, trying to read whatever is actually behind that answer. Tapping the desk thoughtfully, he remarks that he finds the entire story extremely convenient. Then he makes the decision he will be handling this problem personally. Diop is waved away and ordered to concentrate on preparing his own assignment instead. Choi Diop accepts it without a word of protest and bows respectfully on his way out. Outside, his teeth grind, since being barred from his own revenge is its own humiliation. The heavy door pulls shut behind him, and he walks out carrying that frustration with him. Inside, the director warns his son that Kim Moo-won is genuinely dangerous and forbids him from doing anything impulsive. Out in the corridor, Diop's face burns, since his own bosses have just written him off entirely. Walking away, he calms himself down, and this is simply not the right moment to move. Then he takes out his old flip phone, ready to make one very quiet call. Back in the quiet neighborhood, Do-yoon walks empty streets under the streetlights. A phone comes flying out of the dark and smashes against a concrete wall near the stairs. The broken handset rolls to a stop, which means somebody wanted every trace of a conversation destroyed. Hood up, Do-yoon walks slow and steady toward the address he was given. Checking the crumpled scrap of paper, he works out that he is nearly on top of it. Then he starts looking for the one detail that marks the place, the color of the gate. Do-yoon stops in front of a large blue gate and knows he has found the hideout. Coldly, he mutters that his enemies actually picked an excellent place to disappear into. Then he eases the gate open just wide enough to slip through without a sound. Into the yard of an abandoned house he steps with his guard already up. His eyes go over every corner of that dead, empty space. Do-yoon reaches the front door and stops, since there's a man inside talking on the phone. A heavy gangster in a gray tank top smokes and assures somebody that all the merchandise has been moved. Only his partner Gwang-sik is still to come, he says, and then tonight's work is finished. The wooden door comes off its frame under one perfectly placed kick. Do-yoon walks in with red burning behind his eyes and asks the man how he likes this humble little life. The criminal's eyes go wide. There's suddenly somebody standing in his hideout. The call dies instantly. He glares at the intruder, and then recognition hits him. The brute stands up unhurried and strolls toward him, complaining that the kid took his time getting here. Sarcasm drips off his greeting, since nothing in this room frightens him. Then he smiles, wide and ugly, and asks whether the two of them have not met somewhere before. Do-yoon studies that face and concludes, without much interest, that his crew's information was correct. Do-yoon also notices the man was expecting him, which means there is a great deal more buried here. So he asks coldly whether the tip came from the informant sitting inside their allied crew. That petulance is enough. The brute charges with a punch that has genuine weight behind it. Do-yoon slips it cleanly and works it out. Only the traitor knew he existed at all. The brute keeps swinging faster and more desperate, and none of it touches him. Then one lands, heavy, straight into Do-yoon's face and snaps his head sideways. The brute grins, and as far as he is concerned, that settles the entire fight. A sequence of punches drives the boy back into the living room wall. Red comes up behind Do-yoon's eyes. He slips the next one, and the fight changes owner. The counter catches the brute flush on the jaw and takes his legs out from under his thinking. His face twists and he spits, since nothing that size should hit like that. Do-yoon puts together a sequence so fast and so accurate that the man simply cannot stay upright. Staggering, clutching his chest, he backs off screaming curses at the ceiling. Do-yoon gives him no recovery and lands another right hand clean under his chin. The brute goes into the kitchen counter, bottles everywhere, and finally understands how bad this is. Desperate, his hand closes around a heavy glass bottle. The swing is wild, and he shouts that suddenly everyone has decided to collect on the past at once. The bottle shatters across Do-yoon's forearms, and the block costs him nothing. The moment it leaves him open, Do-yoon steps in and drives a straight punch into his chest. The brute hits the kitchen floor and tries to swing back, yelling that he knows a bit of boxing. Do-yoon ends the sentence with a punch to the face and informs him the talking is finished. Thrashing, the man screams that cowardly brats like him are not ready for real life and death. An arm goes up, mocking the idea that he is nothing but a low-grade trafficker. Then he slams Do-yoon into the floor and promises to tear him limb from limb. Something lands in the middle of all that noise hard enough to shake the room. And then the brute screams his arm has been caught in a grip he cannot break. Do-yoon holds him like a vice and closes off every route out of this room. Then he sweeps the man's legs with a speed that should not belong to somebody that size. The brute goes down flat on his back and the whole building feels it. Hood still up, Do-yoon rides the fall down and loads his fist for the finish. The man's face goes into the floor without one flicker of hesitation. Another punch lands full force, purely to guarantee that he does not get up again. Beaten into the floorboards, the man hears Do-yoon demand one answer from him. Looking down, he asks whether this man's strength compares to anything at Daejeong headquarters. The brute's teeth grind, since being dismissed like that is worse than the beating. Face bloodied, Do-yoon says he hopes the man did not badly overestimate himself. 2 steps forward, and he says quietly that there is one final question. Exactly where the children they took were sent. That is the only thing he wants. Cynical laughter, and he asks whether Do-yoon seriously thinks he can save any of them. Do-yoon ignores it entirely, reaches down and picks up a shard of the broken bottle. Coming back, he repeats the question in a whisper that is far worse than shouting. Then he puts the glass straight through the man's leg, and the scream fills the whole house. With absolutely nothing on his face, Do-yoon asks whether that level of commitment is convincing enough. While the man writhes on the floor, he calmly orders him to answer the question. Then he puts his foot on the open wound and leans, and the truth starts coming out. He demands it again while the man sobs in terror. Broken completely, the gangster confesses that the children were sent to Daejeong's branch. Gwang-sik appears in the doorway and asks, laughing, whether the kid really thinks he can get there. Do-yoon does not even look up and presses harder on the wound instead. Finish it, he tells the man on the floor, all of it, exactly where they went. Gasping, he repeats it. The destination is Daejeong's branch, and nothing about that is a rumor. Gwang-sik smiles like something broken and asks again whether the boy has the nerve to walk in there. Out of patience, the traitor attacks, grabbing Do-yoon from behind. The choke locks on, and he tries to end the whole thing in one movement. Do-yoon breaks it with a backward elbow that lands with real intent. Gwang-sik reels away screaming, since the strength in that boy is not what he was promised. Another charge to take back the initiative, and Do-yoon simply is not there. Then Do-yoon has his head in both hands, and everything after that is arranged in advance. The knee goes straight into Gwang-sik's face and sends red across the room. His nose breaks in that instant, and he is thrown backward. Dizzy and coming apart, he tries to stay standing while Do-yoon sets up the last one. A straight right lands on his mouth and takes away whatever defense he had left. Gwang-sik goes down onto the kitchen floor completely unconscious. Red spreads out across the wood and shows exactly how far this went. Do-yoon walks over to him slowly and says his name in a voice with no temperature in it. Things have changed, he tells him, and they are a very long way from the first district now. Do-yoon takes hold of the red jacket collar and points out there's nobody here who will help him. With real hatred, he tells him that sparing his life back then was never indecision. Eyes fixed and merciless. He says he was simply waiting for the right night. His grip tightens as he guarantees he was always prepared to do the worst thing in the room. Do-yoon glares down at him and asks whether he genuinely doubts what he is capable of. Gwang-sik can barely pull air in and tries to mumble something while hanging from his own collar. Do-yoon drops him, and the traitor's body hits the kitchen floor hard. He spits a mouthful of red while Do-yoon watches him from the dark with nothing in his face. Then he asks him one straight question. Does he actually want to stay alive? Staying alive tonight, he says with a terrible smile, is going to cost him a great deal. His life belongs to Choi Diop now, Do-yoon says, and the man starts stammering in panic. How stupid this is. He mocks. How does someone this slow survive a single year in this world? So he asks for a secret bad enough that Choi Diop would beat him half to death for telling it. Gwangsik's eyes go wide. There is no direction left that does not end badly. Do-yoon asks which he is more afraid of, a boss across the city or the thing standing over him. Stammering, Gwangsik begs to be told exactly what he wants to hear. Then it starts coming. The good-looking kids were sold at high prices to certain establishments. Do-yoon's foot comes down on his chest before he can think about it, since he knows what that sentence means. Shaking, the man confirms it. Merchandise like that is rare, and it pays enormously. Gwangsik confesses the rest were taken to a branch company, and behind him, the brute is getting up. Then the brute hits him from behind, cowardly and final, purely to shut his mouth. It sprays across the room and reaches Do-yoon's face, and he does not move at all. Gwangsik's eyes go wide, unable to process being erased by his own partner. Lying there, he whispers the last regretful thing he will ever say before he goes under. Do-yoon stamps down on the traitor's body and tells the brute to shut his mouth for good. Panting and half dead, the brute mutters that his partner should have kept the organization's secrets. Then his legs give out, and he collapses onto the bedroom floor beside the man he just killed. Do-yoon lets out a bored breath while he looks at what this room has turned into. Walking over slowly, he asks almost pleasantly whether the hole in his leg was not enough. Do-yoon hauls him up by the tank top and warns his turn is coming shortly. The brute sneers back and asks what a child like him honestly thinks he can do. Finish it, he screams, since there's nobody left in this house who knows anything else. Then he laughs. Does the kid really imagine a veteran of this business is going to bow to some teenager? With pure hatred, he grabs Do-yoon's arm and demands to know how he dares talk to a superior like this. Red burning in his eyes, Do-yoon just listens to a man daring him to do his worst. So he does it, a headbutt straight into the middle of that face with no wind-up at all. The scream comes with the crack of a nose, and the brute's eyes stop focusing. Do-yoon takes his head in both hands and brings it down onto his knee, begging him to stop now. The brute gets nothing at all, and Do-yoon does not slow for a second. His face is completely empty as he keeps driving the man into the floor. It goes up the wall of that room and says everything about how far past the line this has gone. Do-yoon lifts his head, covered in red, and his expression has not changed once. Terrified out of everything he had, the criminal finally screams out the name of Choi Diop's shell company. Sobbing. He explains it is a small, illegal operation the boss set up and hid from Daegyong's board. Begging for his life, he gets nothing back but Do-yoon's very dark smile. Do-yoon crouches and calmly asks where the other children were taken. A hand presses down on the man's head and he gets it. The drop-off point is in the 4th district. Shaking, the gangster remembers they simply handed the victims over in a case and got paid. On his knees crying, he swears that is everything and begs to be allowed to live. Do-yoon lets go and walks away while the man thanks him and swears to serve him for the rest of his life. He wipes his face clean with his coat sleeve and heads for the door. His eyes burn red in the dark, since he never intended to leave a single witness behind. Then he turns and puts his heel through the man's throat, remarking that they all promised that. Out in the backyard, he finds a hose and washes his hands and his face until the water runs clear. The tap shuts off. He breathes out for a long time and understands his real war started tonight. His own shirt dries his battered face under a dim street lamp. Then he walks away from that house, cursing the men who built a business out of stolen children. Then he checks his phone, and everything he thought he had under control is on fire. The notifications make him swallow hard, with a cold running straight down his spine. 19 missed calls, 1 new message, received at 9:44. His hands shake opening it, since he cannot imagine what could happen in a window that small. His eyes go wide in the dark when he finally reads the words on that screen. Si-young-jae sent it, and it says one thing: his little sister is gone. Do-yoon runs, and everything his body has been through tonight stops mattering to him. The front door bangs open hard enough to startle Do-jin, already waiting in the living room. Then Do-yoon tears through every room in the house looking for any sign of her. The living room is destroyed, clothes across the floor, and somebody came through here fighting. He stops in the middle of it with his eyes wide, and the worst thing has actually happened. His last words to her come back: go and live at their adopted father's house where it is safe. The way she looked at him comes back, worried and stubborn, refusing to believe it was that dangerous. So does the promise soon. They would be adults with a quiet life and none of this in it. it. His hand tightens on the door handle, since he also told her the truth that he was frightened too. All of this he told her was so that she would never have to be afraid again. And the last picture in his head is her crying quietly, which is now the only thing he can see. Standing in the doorway of her empty room, Do-yoon calls himself every name there is for leaving her alone. His fists close until the knuckles crack, and there is nothing controlled about it. He tries to get a grip on himself and loses, since his sister is gone and nothing else exists. Steady footsteps come down the hallway and somebody else is in the house. Han Se-young-jae opens the bedroom door slowly and looks at him with real worry on his face. Quietly, he asks whether Do-yoon has only just got back, and Do-yoon can only nod. Being close by, he got here first, and the state of this house told him everything. Some of the neighbors, he says, saw several very unpleasant men hanging around the block tonight. Do-yoon asks the question that matters. Why would the enemy go after his sister specifically? Red flares behind his eyes, and he says it flatly. They need to search Daegyong's shell company. Se-young-jae cracks open a bottle of water, surprised, and repeats the company's name back to him. Then he holds it out to the exhausted kid, who has clearly been running all night. Pacing, he asks what an illegal front actually has to do with a kidnapping. Do-yoon takes the bottle and says the two things have no direct connection at all. His gaze locks and stays locked, since the kidnapper's real intention is far worse than money. The target behind all of this, he says coldly, was never his sister, it was him. Se-young-jae asks whether that suspicion comes from what the 2nd District man told him. Do-yoon drinks and nods, and admits that nothing a cornered criminal says can be fully trusted. Se-young-jae looks him over with concern and asks whether he is hurt anywhere. Do-yoon changes the subject and says the men tonight were never any real danger to him. Finding her has to come first. Se-young-jae agrees. Then Do-yoon adds it. The director's son was standing outside this house days ago, and whoever handles him knew about the break-in. Se-young-jae puts a hand to his chin and nods slowly, since the logic holds all the way through. Watching the boy in silence, he notes that Do-yoon is ice about everything except his sister. There is nothing to do but move, he agrees, and starts an emergency call to his boss. A hand lands on the kid's shoulder with a promise that the leader is coming out for this himself. Bong Tae-gyu, he adds, is already out there hunting for anyone who saw something. On the phone, he tells Moo-won that Do-yoon is back and not seriously hurt. Then his face changes completely. The boss has news about where she is. From inside a car, Moo-won confirms Tae-gyu found traces leading to the shell company. The branch sits right on the edge of the 2nd District, he says, and hangs up fast. Then Moo-won tells them he is handling this personally and to keep both eyes on Do-yoon. The old flip phone snaps shut with a crack, and Moo-won says the name of the corporation that has been circling him for years. In the middle of the night, a gray car brakes hard on an empty street beside a lamppost. Moo-won steps out, and a young accomplice bows to him far too respectfully. The leader finds all that formality strange and asks him what exactly he is performing. Then he turns his head slowly, since something on this street is not right at all. 2 guards in white helmets are lying on the ground, thoroughly beaten. Relieved, the accomplice explains he had to put them down before they could raise an alarm. The 2 of them watch a vehicle pull away down the road and start working out the next move. Walking, Se-young-jae asks about the girl, and the answer is that nobody knows much. Moo-won says it with total certainty. Somebody very high up gave this order. The 2 of them head for the main entrance of that shady little firm. Se-young-jae smiles thinly and says they should find out whether the man missing an ear is behind it. In a dark warehouse, Do-yoon's sister is tied to a chair with her mouth taped. Furious rather than frightened, she listens to her kidnapper ask if she has finally calmed down. The smile he gives her is entirely wrong, and he asks whether she is naive or simply stupid. Where does a tied-up girl find the nerve to look at him like that? He keeps asking. Then he leans down to her ear and mocks the idea that she has something up her sleeve. A fistful of her hair. And he warns her that none of this goes the way she planned. Grinning, he says he would genuinely enjoy finishing her right now, with his patience nearly gone. Circling the chair, he complains that it has been a long time since they took anyone this valuable. Then he yanks her head back while she tries to scream through the tape. Irritated, he rounds on her and demands to know whether she is playing for time. A gold watch gets checked and he informs her they are professionals who work clean. Smiling at the display, he remarks with real malice that it is getting rather late. Then he backs away from her slowly and starts counting down out loud. His hand goes to the door handle as he says the number 2 very slowly. One One tear runs down her face at the exact moment the countdown ends, and then the door opens and an accomplice announces that the vehicle has arrived. Holding a black cloth hood, the kidnapper asks whether that is what she was hoping to hear. The hood goes over her head fast so she cannot see 1 meter of the route. Then he tells her where she is going, and it is Daegyong's headquarters. Outside Do-yoon's house, Yeom Do-jin looks at the yard and cannot hide what is on his face. Do-yoon's eyes go wide too, since there is no reason for these men to be standing here. Henchmen with metal pipes come out of the dark and block the way to the gate. A blonde one says pleasantly that they were given direct orders to hold this location. Do-yoon smiles at him in a way that is not friendly and says they will be leaving much faster than that. Across the city, a gray metal door bangs open and somebody walks into a room. Moo-won and Si-young-jae come in together, checking every corner as they move. Moo-won remarks that the street outside is a catastrophe, while in here everything is suspiciously tidy. They step into the hall and find 4 of Daegyong's men eating and drinking without a care. The men jump up, startled, and start complaining about strangers walking into their place. Moo-won breathes out, exhausted, and does not acknowledge a word of it. Then with a stare that empties the room, he asks where the girl is. Insulted, they charge with bottles in their hands. One of them hurls a green bottle at full force. Moo-won does not move an inch. Then something extremely fast goes past him and the room turns over. Si-young-jae slips the thrown bottle and leaves the man who threw it standing completely open. The thug's eyes go wide, and nobody explained that the quiet one moves like that. Si-young-jae picks up a green bottle of his own, smiles unpleasantly, and says he does not intend to make this easy. His eyes catch the light as he sets up something that is going to hurt. Si-young-jae goes straight at the man trying to defend himself with a heavy gray iron bar. That man's face collapses into terror, since he already knows the block is not going to work. The bottle shatters across his head with everything Si-young-jae has behind it. That henchman drops unconscious, and the rest of them start backing toward the walls. Si-young-jae resets instantly, sliding his foot across the floor, already lining up the next one. A punch lands square on another thug's face and sends fluid across the room. Teeth clenched, the injured man tries to recover from something he cannot recover from. A fast punch comes out, and Si-young-jae is simply not standing there anymore. Then a straight punch buries itself in that man's stomach with genuinely frightening speed. The follow-up catches his jaw and switches him off standing up. On the floor, an accomplice grabs a shard of green glass to try something cowardly. The improvised blade comes at Si-young-jae, held out in front of him. Si-young-jae drops under the attack with reflexes that belong to a much younger man. Then he comes up into a right hook that takes the man's balance completely away. The impact knocks fluid and teeth out of him and throws him into the wall. He goes out cold, and silence comes back to a hall full of broken glass. The last henchman lifts a heavy wooden bar to swing it at Si-young-jae's back. Si-young-jae reads it and lets the wood cut the air where his head was. Then he slides into position behind the man, with almost insulting precision. His fist closes and he looks at the man with nothing forgiving in his face at all. The punch lands full force and takes away the last defense anybody in that room had. Moo-won watches the entire thing without changing posture, and none of it surprised him. Then he raises a hand and tells Si-young-jae to leave that last one alive. Si-young-jae points at the man on the floor and asks whether he should not simply finish him. Moo-won says he can do whatever he wants with the rest of them. Then the older man walks slowly over to one of the injured, lying near the metal shelves. Crouching, he demands to know where the victims are while the gangster stammers in terror. The man explains they only ever get orders to guard the faction's abandoned warehouse. Moo-won narrows his eyes and says the name of the man behind all of this out loud. Desperate, the henchman stammers denials while shaking hard enough to be heard. Without a word, Moo-won picks another shard of broken bottle up off the concrete. The name comes again, and this time it is not a question. Sobbing with fear, the man finally breaks and confirms that yes, that was the order. Moo-won lets out a long breath, since this is far worse than what he came here expecting. The violence from years ago comes back to him when his crew first moved into this district. Still crouching, he asks whether these were the men behind that welcome. The injured one explains he only joined recently, and the senior crew knows the details. Eyes burning, Moo-won demands to know where the rest of them are right now. The henchman starts shaking, and he can feel the secret leaving him. The confession comes out. The crew went to the first district to remove somebody important. Then he drops his head, fully aware he has just made a fatal mistake. Moo-won stands up calmly, having taken everything this man was worth. Then he calls Si-young-jae over to plan where they hit next. "Clear the warehouse out," he orders, and walks toward the exit without looking back. Back in the yard, one of Dae-gyung's men smirks and orders them to clear out immediately. If they understood the warning, he adds, they should already be walking. Then more of them come running in with lengths of metal in their hand. The blonde one shouts the important part to his crew. The kid has to be taken alive, and Yam-do-jin, entirely unhurried, starts pulling on a pair of black leather gloves. Then an arm the size of a leg, covered in tattoos, closes around the blonde man's throat from behind. His eyes go wide. He has just found out whose trap this actually was. The thrashing does nothing, and the grip on his neck does not move by a millimeter. The rest of them start shouting, and nobody saw where that arm came from. Ong Tae-gyu picks him up and puts him through the concrete floor. The blue-haired giant remarks that the enemy crew has turned up embarrassingly late. Do-jin sets himself and says dryly that they will be paying for that delay with their bodies. A masked man breaks from the group and comes at them ready to start something. The masked man runs in with hatred all over his face, certain this is going to be simple. Then his pupils blow wide. Whatever is standing in front of him is a completely different order of thing. Tae-gyu drops him with exactly one punch. Behind him, a man in a baseball cap backs away shaking, since the rumors about this crew were all true. Tae-gyu gives him no time and lands a straight punch that sends the cap spinning off into the dark. Do-yoon watches that display of raw power with something close to shock on his face. The tattooed giant walks heavily toward the next man, who has stopped being able to move. His eyes catch the light, and there's not going to be any mercy in this yard tonight. Another blow lands square in a thug's face and puts fluid across the wall. The thug is thrown backward and hits the ground unconscious before he lands. Do-jin comes over wondering why an empty house is full of Dae-gyung's men. He adjusts his coat and guesses the other leader has come back with nothing useful either. Do-yoon thinks it through in silence. This whole thing may be one enormous trap. The two of them work out the same answer. The rival bosses are moving separately. Elsewhere, Hwang Sung-hyuk is losing his mind, since none of his men will answer their phones. Nothing tonight is going the way he arranged it, and he is screaming about it. His assistant in the suit tries to calm him, suggesting the crew has only just started moving. Furious, the redhead charges at him, shouting that he does not want to hear one more excuse. A fistful of collar, and he tells the man to remember his position. Then he turns away, disgusted that his men cannot complete a single task. The phone flips open, and he demands to know whether any of them understand how he survived this long. His father's men have never respected him, so he decides to run his own plan instead. Smiling in a way that suits him badly, he announces he has a perfect strategy of his own. Back at the yard, Do-jin is still working through the shape of the district.
Do-yoon
Remembers the man in the hideout giving up the name of the 4th district. That man swore through tears that the address was everything he knew about where the girl went. Do-yoon turns and asks Do-jin to tell the boss they are moving there now. Then he starts running into the dark, and nothing is going to stop him reaching his sister. Do-yoon is already gone when Do-jin shouts after him to wait. Do-yoon does not slow down or look back once. So Do-jin walks over to the henchman lying on the ground and mentions that he knows he is awake. Looking down at him, he asks whether he wants more of this before he starts talking. The city goes past in a blur while Do-yoon runs flat out through the dark streets. Bitterly, he thinks that if the other director were involved, this would be far easier to unpick. In a dead-end alley, a group of teenage delinquents are waiting for somebody. One of them mocks him for how long it has been since he ran away from school. Another spits on the concrete and asks whether this is really the kid who put their boss down. A thug in a brown jacket sneers at how poor he is and asks what he thinks he has achieved. Sleeves come up, and he complains that his crew had to clean up the mess Do-yoon made. Do-yoon, hood up, looks down at him with absolutely nothing in his eyes. The bully charges shouting, and Do-yoon catches his arm and puts a fist through the middle of his face. The bully drops unconscious onto the wet pavement without a sound. The others stare, since none of them expected a teenager to hit like that. Eyes lit, Do-yoon tells them their thinking has not grown up one day since school. Shaking and sweating, one of them curses him, and they have already lost this. Do-yoon walks toward them slowly and says that is exactly why their red-haired heir will lose too. Then he charges the rest of the group and disappears into the dark at full speed. One of them locks up completely as Do-yoon closes the distance. A flying knee catches a boy in a gray jacket square in the chest. The sound goes down the whole alley as the kid is thrown well clear of where he was standing. The kid lies on the concrete groaning, both arms wrapped around his own ribs. Do-yoon looks at the wreckage without any sign of tiredness or doubt. Then he plants his feet, since now he is going to ask them questions. Everything they know about his sister is what he demands, while every one of them shakes. With contempt, he mutters about grown criminals hiding behind teenagers. His bruised fists close, since he is now certain Sung Hyuk arranged the whole kidnapping. Panicking, the boys start shouting at each other to call the rest of them up from downstairs. Do-yoon hears it and works out there are more of them waiting inside the building. So he runs for the entrance and leaves the ones on the ground where they are. Watching from a distance, Do-jin decides that letting the kid handle this alone will make him far stronger. Do-yoon is intelligent, he adds, and knows exactly how to fight a situation, not just a person. Taegyu sighs and agrees the right move for now is to observe and stay out of it. Dae-gyong also sent far more men tonight than anyone predicted, he points out. Do-jin says the order of business is simple. Get the girl back, then erase the faction. Taegyu nods without speaking, and the real fight is coming and it is close. The second district is his to hold, he says, and he tells Do-jin to message him the moment anything changes. Privately, Do-jin thinks the rival mafia splitting its forces is the best gift they could have been given. Across the district, a gangster carries the tied-up girl over his shoulder up a stairwell. The kidnapper climbs steadily toward the roof with her completely immobilized. Humming, he walks the rooftop, entirely satisfied with how the night has gone. Another henchman bows to him and thanks him for a job beautifully done. Behind a wall, a man in a beanie watches all of it and does not like any of it. Quietly, he makes a call and reports that the rival mafia's people are not at the location. Then he asks his superior what they are supposed to do about it now. Do-yoon reappears with his face marked, eyes focused, and none of the fight gone out of him. A foot comes down on a fallen man's chest, and he demands answers about his sister. Out of breath, Do-yoon looks at the pile of teenagers he just went through. And then he understands that whole ambush was only ever there to burn his time. Then he walks over to the attacker in the blue shirt who is trying to crawl away. Crouching, he starts going through the injured boy's pockets, ignoring every protest. Out comes the kid's phone, and he calmly announces that he is borrowing it. In the blue jacket, the kid screams at him to give the phone back. Do-yoon answers with a fast punch straight into the middle of his face. That kid goes out cold on the pavement without another word in him. Do-yoon throws the boy's own words back at him about how friends are supposed to help each other. Then he says darkly that he intends to use this borrowed phone to talk to their boss. The glowing keypad takes his fingers, and this is the last move of the night. Sung Hyuk's voice comes through, furious, ordering his men to finish the kid off immediately. In a voice with ice all the way through it, Do-yoon tells him to stop everything now if he wants to stay alive. The antics at school he tolerated, he says, but they are not at school anymore. On the other end, the redhead's eyes go wide, having just recognized who is holding that phone. Do-yoon offers no explanation at all and simply closes the handset, smiling darkly. He confirms what he already suspected. The spoiled heir is behind the kidnapping. Do-yoon steps over the body at his feet and promises to end this plan tonight. Then something stops him. He lifts his foot off the man, having just remembered something else. Taegyu appears beside him in the dark shirt and says they need to get down there now. The tattooed giant points out that they are running out of time and every second is expensive. The two of them move fast, leaving the fallen behind and looking for the quickest way out. Do-yoon breathes out with relief and keeps his eyes on every shadow in that street. Then he throws the green phone into the dark so nothing traces back to him. It flies through the air and shatters loudly across the pavement. On the cracked screen, Sung Hyuk's name is still lighting up, calling back over and over. In a mafia car, a man in a suit tells his boss he will ride in the back with the prisoner. The driver complains about that arrangement and insists the girl does not belong to their crew. Irritated, the boss slaps him across the face and tells him to stop talking nonsense. Then he catches the cold look his own subordinate is giving him and does not like it at all. Men with iron bars come out of nowhere and block the vehicle in. They come at the men in suits fast and accurate, and it turns immediately. The driver shouts that the other faction hid critical information about this entire job. Then he rants that with danger like this: the rescue price should be 4 times higher. Eyes wild, he screams at them, demanding to know how they dared make it this easy for the rivals. Behind him, his own men keep getting taken apart against the side of the black car. It collapses into a full brawl, heavy punches, fluid across the wet pavement. One of the suits takes a punch that breaks his teeth and puts him on the ground. Inside the vehicle, the boss cannot work out where fighters like this came from in a forgotten suburb. The man in the white mask lands a clean right hook and drops another bodyguard. Another strike comes through with surgical speed and lands flush on a jaw. Then one of the masked attackers takes a shot of his own and goes down unconscious. The accomplice in the suit hits back and breaks the masked man's guard completely apart. A bodyguard screams at the driver that they have to get out of here right now. Furious, the enemy boss throws himself into the driver's seat as it all comes apart. The van starts with a curse, and his hands are nowhere near steady. The vehicle tears away and leaves the rest of the brawl behind in the dead-end alley. The driver rants that he will personally take revenge on every single member of that faction. Then a black motorcycle comes out of the dark, tearing down the street far faster than anything should move at night. The rider throws it into a skid that scrapes sparks off the asphalt and lays the bike across the road. The machine slides sideways and slams straight into the front of the oncoming van. The driver's eyes go wide, since nobody sane does what he has just watched somebody do. Down on the ground, Han Si-young-jae gets his breath back after putting a motorcycle through a moving vehicle. Eyes lit, and a very wrong smile on him. He looks up at the wreck and asks himself whether this is where they are keeping her. That look answers its own question. Nobody who came out of that van is walking out of this district. His first punch lands on a henchman's jaw and puts him out standing up. Across the district, Do-yoon is still running, terrified of arriving too late. He lands a flying kick into a man's chest while blaming himself for every second of this. A flight of concrete steps, another man down on the way, and he remembers exactly what he promised her. His face says the rest, since keeping her safe was the one promise he had. Beside him, Taegyu's eyes catch the light with something entirely unforgiving in them. Si-young-jae remarks that the kidnappers simply ran into an extraordinary amount of bad luck tonight. The tattooed giant walks over heavily and tells him there's nothing to apologize for. Si-young-jae does not blink, already setting himself for the next round of it. Then the two of them see a man in a suit standing alone under a lamppost. Si-young-jae smiles thinly and wonders out loud whether they have finally found somebody who gives the orders. His eyes fix on him and he promises that none of these people leave the district alive. Inside the van, the driver hammers his fists on the steering wheel, swearing at the top of his lungs. Teeth grinding, he curses this suburb and everything he has just seen on that road. Then the tied-up girl comes up off the back seat and puts the rope across his throat. His eyes bulge as he tears at it, and he cannot get his fingers under it. She remembers the training days, sitting quietly and watching her brother learn to defend himself. She never said a word back then, and she stored every single movement. She remembers Do-yoon struggling with it while Taegyu patiently explained why the choke works. She pulls harder, and it turns out the theory holds up perfectly in practice. She hates that she did not do this sooner, then throws the thought away and puts everything she has into her arms. The gangster is nearly out of air, still clawing at her, and his strength is visibly going. Then he breaks it, spins around with his eyes wild, and screams that she almost killed him, consumed with it. He slaps her across the face and promises that nothing about tonight will be easy now. Then the van door is torn open and Si-young-jae is standing directly behind him. A fistful of shirt collar, and he pulls the driver bodily out of the vehicle. The driver hits the pavement while Si-young-jae looks down at him with open contempt. Wheezing, he massages his own throat and tries to find his breath after that landing. Then his pupils go wide. He has worked out exactly who closed the road on him. Si-young-jae scoffs and says that in the end the kidnappers were nothing but weak worms. Furious, the thug throws a right hook into his face, and Si-young-jae does not react to it at all. The driver steps back, since nobody absorbs a punch like that and stays that bored. The tough act goes back on, and he mocks his opponent for getting a little too excited. Then Si-young-jae moves, and in the dark he is very hard to follow. One hand takes the man's face with surgical speed and shuts down any punch before it starts. Eyes like ice, he says he would never have worked for a coward like this, not even back then. In another room, a bearded boss and his assistant in a white dress shirt are arguing. The man in the suit insists they have to make hard decisions to keep the group safe. The bearded man refuses outright. They are never going to make easy money off children. Losing patience, the assistant shouts and asks how they are supposed to answer to the leadership of the giant corporation. Back on the street, Si-young-jae lands a straight punch that breaks the gangster's nose on impact. The follow-up goes into the stomach, and he tells him he was never fit to lead anything. The driver spits fluid and folds up in agony since it has finally reached him that he lost. Si-young-jae gives him no recovery and puts another precise punch through his face. The impact throws him backward, eyes wide, finally understanding what he picked a fight with. On the wet pavement, the driver is crying with terror, having chosen the wrong people tonight. Si-young-jae finishes it with one blow to the mouth and puts him out for good. The punch lands flush on the jaw and sends him skidding away across the road. Standing over him, Si-young-jae warns him that he will very soon find out where he belongs. Then he takes the man by the hem of his trousers and starts dragging him down the street. Under the yellow lamplight, he walks over while his partner finishes tying the man up. The kidnapper is left unconscious on the pavement with nothing left to react with. Elsewhere, Kim Moo-won looks out at the city skyline with Do-yoon's sister beside him saying nothing. In a serious voice, he tells her she has to move to the warehouse too, since that is the only safe place left. She lowers her head and accepts it quietly, hearing perfectly well that he is right. It was the correct decision, he tells her, and living in debt and drifting like her brother is a terrible life. She stops halfway across the room and lets out a breath with real anguish in it. Then she hesitates, unable to make herself agree about her brother. Outside, a subordinate in a suit is shouting that they have just been given clear orders to pull out. And in the cab of a tractor, a strange man scratches his head and starts talking to the crew. Word has come down. He tells Moo-won perfectly seriously for everybody to clear out of this place. Moo-won's eyes widen, since he has no idea who this lunatic thinks he is. The man swings down from the cab laughing in his face and mentions he has more than 11 years on the road. He introduces himself as the assistant of the 3rd demolition crew with a smile that is entirely fake. Hands in his pockets, the man in the glasses points out he is still in exactly the same position he was. The real message, he says, is that the big boss wants everyone out of this area immediately. A folded sheet of paper hits Moo-won's chest and he calls it a friendly warning. For now, the smile is unpleasant, and he remarks that whoever they are chasing is a genuinely tough nut to crack. Then he raises a closed fist and announces that the beating was a gift for the gang. His face hardens, and Seong-jae tells him to show some respect in this house. Angry now, the man in the glasses grips the younger man's head hard and demands respect for his old master. Moo-won takes hold of his arm and tells him to stop that nonsense right now. Laughing that Moo-won has not changed one bit, he offers to settle it properly. Crumpling the paper in his fist, he asks whether the two of them can really take that kind of heat. The man in the glasses grinds his teeth since the temperature in the room has gone somewhere he did not intend. His hands tighten, and privately he decides he will tolerate this attitude for exactly 1 month. His eyes catch the light in the darkness while he repeats it to himself. 1 month. On the way out, he shoulders straight into Seong-jae and says he wants no excuses. Then he walks off swearing, furious about the reception he got. Seong-jae's face goes cold, and he watches the man leave without one flicker of fear. Very calmly, he tells the boss he will pass the new details to the rest of the crew. Moo-won just nods, and every year of this business is sitting on his face. Do-yoon's sister watches all of it in shock, understanding none of what is about to happen. Outside, the tractor's claw is still buried where it punched clean through the concrete wall, hanging upside down from it. An enemy tries to shout, and the green tape across his mouth kills the sound. Sitting in a chair, Moo-won works out that the rival group has decided to move much faster than expected. The warning on the table gets a long look, and this timing is no coincidence at all. Seong-jae remarks that nothing on paper from that crew has ever been worth reading. His eyes start burning red, and he asks to settle this himself, once and for all. Moo-won tells him to hold, since it is far too early to move in that district. Left with nothing to argue, the younger man accepts it and nods. In her chair, Do-yoon's sister lets out a long breath, trying to get herself back under control. Seong-jae asks if she is all right, and she answers tensely that it is all going to get better soon. Then she says that this whole mess seems to hold far more secrets than she ever imagined. He turns and says this situation might actually end up working in their favor. Calmer now. She asks whether she can ask about something she just watched. So he explains it. The man in the tractor used to be his master, back when he ran with a fighting crew. The scene goes back to his school days, when he was the biggest problem in the neighborhood. In a dark alley, the student stood over several bullies laid out on the ground. Out of nowhere, the man in the glasses walked up smiling, telling him how strong he was. Then a card went into the boy's hand with an invitation to come and work with the crew. On the little white card was a job title: assistant of the demolition crew, and a phone number. The cleanup crew's actual work, he explained, was settling matters with brute force. His face went wrong, and he said they simply take down anybody standing in the way. Then a giant iron sledgehammer comes down and throws sparks off the ground. Gloved hands closed around a wooden handle, and the boy was already walking into something dangerous. His master swung the hammer while the boy put a flying kick through the man in front of him. A straight punch landed that was far too strong for a teenager and put another man in a suit on the floor. Beside him, the man in the glasses brought the sledgehammer down with an expression that belonged in a cage. Quietly, he says that it is very difficult to explain adult business to an innocent child. She understands that this is exactly what he means and lowers her head. Then Do-yoon comes running into the room with his tattooed partner right behind him. The moment she sees her brother, she runs at him crying. They hold on to each other in the middle of the hall, and the tension in that room finally breaks. Watching them, Moo-won scratches the back of his head with Si-young-jae standing beside him. Then he goes quiet, knowing exactly how much worse this is about to get. Taegyu apologizes for being late and asks whether anything else went down here. He has an urgent notice, he says, and also a question about the tractor buried in the wall. Moo-won gets straight to it. The bosses have ordered the whole team out of the entire area. Taegyu cannot understand why they would send a man from the demolition crew to deliver that. The older man explains it simply. The enemy suspects them for being close with the other rival boss. Si-young-jae walks over and asks to be excused into the middle of that conversation. A finger goes up at the man hanging upside down, and he asks what they intend to do with the prisoner. The prisoner's eyes open in despair, having just been caught being awake. Moo-won answers with absolutely nothing in his voice, "Get rid of him." Si-young-jae smiles in a way nobody should smile and agrees with the decision completely. The green tape comes off the man's mouth with far more anger than the job requires. The prisoner starts crying and begging, swearing. He is nothing but an ordinary employee. Si-young-jae crouches down and invites him to keep up the tough attitude he had earlier. The threats the man made get repeated back to him, and he mentions that he cannot see the bully anywhere now. Humiliated, the prisoner starts barking like a dog to save his own life. Still barking, he swears he has valuable information and that he can be very useful to them. Si-young-jae's face goes flat, and watching this is genuinely embarrassing. This is a poor example to set in front of the girl, he says, and tells him to shut his mouth. Then he puts the green tape back over it and cuts the begging off mid-word. A long sigh, and he complains that the man is completely out of his mind. The enemy's side of this he has already worked out, and he is ready to close the matter. Then Do-yoon takes hold of his friend's arm and asks him to wait one moment. The ropes come undone, and the prisoner drops straight onto the concrete floor. Then he takes him by the shirt collar and pulls him up fast, with no patience left at all. His face is the last thing in this world that man wants to be looking at, and he asks what the enemy has to say. Think very carefully before answering. He advises if he intends to keep living. Red burning in his eyes, Do-yoon warns him that the answer had better be a useful one. A battered, bald thug drags his feet down the street heading for his gang's office. Instead of a headquarters, he finds a ruin with a huge excavator smashing through the walls of the building. He whispers one name in fear, Kim Moo-won. It all started the night before in a dark alley where he ran into a stranger. The thug glares at the man and snarls, asking whether he wants to be next. The stranger only tells him flatly to stop. The furious giant charges him straight away. His opponent hooks the standing leg out from under him. The heavy body pitches forward, and the boy never even takes his hands out of his pockets. One lightning turn, and a crushing fist comes all the way round into his head. The thug drops onto the asphalt with nothing left in him, and the winner says, without interest, that now he has someone to talk to. Beaten but not broken, he keeps walking forward. He kicks the door off its hinges and shouts at the top of his voice. Jang Man-gyu bursts into the room, the man under boss Park Jong-hyeon, his eyes burning and a wild scream tearing out of him. The two men inside turn round, irritated by the noise. The gray-haired leader tells his partner quietly that this giant is definitely not planning to run. Man-gyu clenches his fist and moves heavily towards them. He roars at them to hand over boss Park Jong-hyeon, loud enough to shake the walls. The gray-haired man answers in a freezing tone, telling Man-gyu to get out if he wants to live, since they have been looking for the missing man themselves. The big man's face twists, and his teeth grind with fury. Screaming at them to give the boss back, Man-gyu throws himself forward. The gray-haired man repeats, tired of it, that their boss has vanished and they do not have him. His opponent yells back, outraged that anyone would come looking for Park Jong-hyeon here. A giant fist passes a millimeter from his face, and the gray-haired man leans back easily to let the crushing blow miss. The boy ducks smartly and lets the heavy fist go over his head, and straight away he plants a hard punch under the big man's ribs. A dangerous red light flares in his eyes, and his fists close tighter. But the bald opponent in the gray suit is already loading up another crushing attack. The enemy swings again with a furious shout, and the boy slips under his arm without effort. He needs to finish this as fast as possible. He snaps his arm out and drives his fist straight into his opponent's face. The force of it throws the bald man backwards, spitting. A dark-haired man in a light shirt watches the fight without any expression at all. The boy spins on the spot fought and lands a heavy turning kick to his opponent's head. The giant only croaks, finally losing his balance completely. One last jump, and he hammers the enemy into the concrete, throwing up a cloud of dust. He goes down hard and slides across the cold tile on his back. His opponent steps forward with confidence while he rolls away. He grits his teeth in shock, because he was told to watch out for Kim Moo-won and nobody else. But what stands in front of him is a real monster, with a bloody shine in its eyes and a predator's smile. One thought hammers in his head. What kind of insane freak is this? A heavy punch tears the air apart and lands right on his jaw. He tries to wind up a punch and eats a counterhook instead. His opponent is coming at him again with rage-empty eyes, and the pain is turning everything black. He screams a curse at him, completely out of his mind. The answering fist finds his jaw again and cuts the scream off. Bone cracks, and a last turning punch makes him spit blood and fly to the ground. But a hand suddenly catches the wrist and stops the finishing blow. A heavy punch takes the man off his feet, and he sprawls on the asphalt without moving. The gray-haired fighter breathes out hard and wipes off sweat, surprised that a simple street fight has left him this winded for the first time in a long while. Flat on the ground, the enemy realizes with horror that this is no ordinary street punk and asks him, afraid, who he actually is. The two men look at each other. A local heavy surviving an attack by former fighters of the Huxiang demolition crew is nothing like a coincidence. The black-haired man in the gray shirt frowns hard because this prisoner turns out to be a man of Park Jeong-hyun himself who worked directly for the director of a large company. The brutal thug only shouts back through the blood, demanding his boss be handed over right now. The gray-haired man crouches beside the beaten man while his partner suggests holding him for now, since there is no point trying to have a normal conversation with a lunatic. He adds firmly that the first thing they need now is to find the missing Park Jeong-hyun. Deep night, and the scene moves to a quiet room. A woman sits on the bed with her back turned, studying documents by the light of the night window. Going through the papers, she works out that Park Jeong-hyun's people held legal status and that these were nothing like the usual racketeers from the outskirts. She whispers that this is turning into far too much trouble. The woman is Lee Ju-hui, the youngest deputy head of human resources in the Huxiang organization, and she is working out her next move. Sitting on the bed, the woman in glasses scrolls through the report on her tablet and has to admit that Han Seong-jae did the job perfectly. Han Seong-jae stretches out beside her on the bed and remarks lazily that she got up too early and that the bed here is not bad. Her bare feet touch the cold floor. She tells him dryly to get out, and Han Seong-jae just asks, confused, why she has suddenly turned so cold. He hugs her from behind with a sly smile and asks for the car keys since he is meeting friends this evening. Instead of answering, she presses a button on the intercom and orders in an icy voice that this piece of filth be removed immediately. A door lock clicks in the dark and fear shows on Han Seong-jae's face as heavy steps echo through the room. A huge bodyguard in glasses comes in at speed and puts a fist into Han Seong-jae's jaw, knocking him off his feet. While the hired man beats the boy with his fists without mercy, the woman stands calmly by the window and does not even turn her head. Han Seong-jae is left lying on the floor, beaten, bloodied, and barely able to wheeze through the pain. Stepping over the wrecked body, she praises the Huxiang fighters for perfect work without interest. On her way out, she tells the guard, briefly, to bring the car round. A moment later, a white car disappears into the evening at full speed. Piles of rotting rubbish everywhere and a foul stink in the air ruin the mood immediately. The deputy head looks at this miserable sight with open disgust through the tinted glass of her expensive car. She remarks coldly that there could be no better place for an exile, and the tinted window slides up. The car jolts on a dull impact from underneath. The shock throws her forward, and irritation flashes across her face. The frightened driver shouts that they have hit something and throws the door open. Air so thick and foul pours into the cabin that it turns her stomach. The driver's panicked voice comes from outside. They have a serious problem. She closes her eyes, tired, swears at another delay, and refusing to wait any longer moves for the door. A black patent high heel comes down onto the dirty road. The woman straightens to her full height and slams the car door behind her. She asks the driver coldly what exactly happened, then folds her arms and reminds him, irritated, about the enormous pressure from headquarters to have team leader Kim Moo-won removed from his post. Her pupil contracts sharply in shock. She pulls air into her lungs, and a wild scream goes down the whole street. Her legs give way and she comes down hard on her palms on the filthy asphalt right beside the wheel. Down on the cold asphalt, she screams at the driver in fury, blaming him for being careless. The worried driver starts making excuses excuses, insisting there was nobody on the road and that the injured man had been lying there from the start. She gets up, looks closely at the man in front of the bonnet, and freezes when she notices that his hands are tied tightly behind his back. She asks about the tied hands in surprise, and then a clear knock of heels sounds behind her. A bound young man lies face down in front of the bumper, and when she makes out his face, her heart drops. Park Jong-hyun himself is lying unconscious in front of her. At that same moment, the silhouette of a man in an expensive suit rises over them. She sighs heavily, throwing her head back, and curses this day for another failure. The woman slides a hand under her jacket, digs through the pockets, and her fingers find something inside. Her assistant in the gray suit appears silently beside her and waits. With a quiet rustle, she pulls out a pink packet, tears it open, and unhurriedly drops a stick of gum into her mouth. Her heels ring loudly through the silence as she walks back to the car, where a motionless body lies on the asphalt. Without any warning, she kicks her companion in the gray suit as hard as she can. The assistant barely stays on his feet, and wiping cold sweat away, asks in fright whether the victim is still breathing, while the woman covers her face with her palm. One hand on her head in irritation, she orders him to get the injured man to a hospital immediately and find out whether he can be saved. The man in the gray suit drops quickly to his knees beside the wounded man, who is groaning quietly on the filthy ground. The assistant examines the wrecked body and assures his boss that they did not hit him that hard, and that although the arm is broken, he is not about to die. Then he starts slapping the man across the face and suddenly shouts in shock, recognizing Park Jong-hyun. Bent over the bloodied body in the middle of a filthy alley, the man in the suit says, irritated, that this whole trip into the slums has been a waste of time. His companion in glasses flinches at the unexpected sound and asks, tense, what they do now. The man looks closer at the motionless face and says in shock that this piece of filth has no pulse. The assistant studies the burns on the wound and the needle marks and says that nobody meant to kill him from the start and that he was just given a serious beating. The bloodied face leaves no doubt, and if it was not that, then it was a warning. But a second later, the body on the ground jerks into wild convulsions, screaming with unbearable pain, while the woman watches, tense. His attempt to find a crack in Kim Moo-won's armor ended in disaster, because all he did was expose his own weak spot, and he paid for it brutally. The woman in glasses wonders why anyone would dump a half-dead Park Jong-hyun in the middle of a street where any passerby could find him. The man in the suit straightens up over the body and agrees that leaving the wounded man out in the open makes no sense at all. He was an important figure for the Gunilpa organization, and leaving him here was extremely stupid. A gray-haired man with red eyes walks through the night city, telling the man on the phone coldly that Park Jong-hyun could not have escaped on his own. Haegyu talks calmly into the phone, suggesting that somebody may have done all the dirty work for them. The other man cuts him off dryly. It is too early to celebrate until the target's death is confirmed. The boy suddenly freezes on the spot and whispers into the phone that he has found him. Two figures in suits stand in the headlights of a white car, with a bound man writhing helplessly at their feet, while a cold female voice orders him to come over to their side right now. The boy hangs up in irritation, having recognized the woman as Lee Ju-hui. He could simply turn around and walk away, but common sense tells him that walking past is not going to work. A memory ricochets through his head the first time she walked up to him to the dry knock of heels. Introducing herself as the new employee of the HR department, she started lecturing him about the way he looked. She insisted that his dirty clothes were frightening his colleagues in the building and damaging the image of the firm. The warnings about how violations affect his appraisal made the boy wonder what kind of creature this was. That icy, sharp look through her lenses proved even then that this woman was not one to joke with. The silver-haired young man meets Deputy Director Lee Ju-hui in the middle of the street and asks, surprised, what brought her all the way out here. Ju-hui congratulates him on the rumors about his appointment as the youngest branch manager, and he looks around, confused, noticing only one escort with her. The woman folds her arms and asks coldly whether she really needs a crowd of guards to visit a district under Hyuksong control. She asks, mocking him, whether he was planning to arrange some kind of accident for her. The branch manager goes pale instantly and starts making excuses, but Ju-hui cuts him off sharply, reminding him that he has got too comfortable and forgotten how much work the company is carrying. She adds that her words are not meant for the ears of assistant manager Bang Tae-gyu, but since they have crossed paths anyway, she wants to ask a few questions. The woman asks directly why Park Jong-hyun is lying here injured and brings up an old report from 3 years ago about money received from him. She compares two different company reports in which the running of the bound prisoners business was for some reason credited to the Gun Cheng-dong team. Then she demands an explanation for why nobody reported that team's involvement in 3 years and warns him sternly sternly about the responsibility for forming secret factions. In a shaking voice, the young man stammers that this is not his area of responsibility at all. She answers hard. That team is a special unit for bringing the district under company jurisdiction, so headquarters should have known about anything they did immediately. Looking around the scene, she promises to file this as negligence of duty or refusal to report if he tries to bury it. Lee Ju-hui turns sharply towards the sound of confident steps in the dark alley, where the bound Park Jeong-hyun lies helpless on the asphalt, and says dryly that there is no need for that. Han Seong-jae comes out of the half-dark, and his heavy look and calm certainty take control of the situation at once, as he asks dryly why Lee Ju-hui is putting his fighter through a second interrogation when the whole incident is already documented. Lee Ju-hui freezes, her eyes widening behind her lenses in alarm as she recognizes her colleague, and all she gets out is deputy head. Han Seong-jae looks straight at her and speaks without giving an inch, saying that every piece of key information, along with the signed statements of the fighters, has already been submitted, so there are no grounds for questioning unless she has found errors in the report. Trying to take the initiative back, Lee Ju-hui offers to report on Park Jeong-hyun's condition right now, but the field man hurriedly confirms that everything in the report is fine, trying to smooth it over. She just narrows her eyes in silence, sensing the trick. Only now, finally settled into her new post, does Lee Ju-hui start to see the hidden machinery of power inside the company clearly. The main force and the real backbone of the HR department turns out to be deputy head Han Seong-jae, and the rumors that he built the most influential unit in the company, one even the chief executive has to reckon with, are confirmed down to the last detail. His cleverest move was making Shin Deok-cheol leader of the 3rd Demolition Group, because Seong-jae deliberately held back his promotion to keep this experienced fighter working on the ground. Snow starts falling outside and the two men stop and look up. Standing under the heavy snowfall outside the office, Ju-hui understands that an ordinary employee would never even have thought of personnel moves like that. Few people liked the arrogance of leader Shin Deok-cheol and assistant Bang Tae-gyu, but in terms of results, they were exactly what the firm needed, because after the conflict with the finance department, Deok-cheol simply took on their work on top of his own, which earned him absolute respect and shut down any internal squabbling. He stands with his back to her in the falling snow, having earned nothing in the company but a spotless reputation. Looking at him, the girl thinks with admiration about his exceptional skill and dreams of growing to that level herself one day, while the cold air turns her excited breath into frost. She shakes her head, orders herself back to work, and asks him to keep her informed about Park Jeong-hyun. The man explains that their contacts with Park Jeong-hyun started 3 years ago through Bang Tae-gyu's outsourcing and have never been broken since. Recently, Jeong-hyun got mixed up in dirty business with a company called Dara Manpower, so he and his assets were taken over under the cover of a volunteer initiative. And today, he concludes, Park Jeong-hyun was kidnapped. Seong-jae says they have been running a secret investigation and suspect Choi Dae-yeop of the Daeyoung Corporation, and that name puts Ju-hui on alert. He deliberately mixed facts with his own guesses, counting on the meticulous Ju-hui to start matching up details, because the deeper she dug, the more believable his version would become. Having studied the report, the girl drops her doubts completely, because the state the kidnapped man was in only confirms the worst fears. Putting it together, she understands that if the kidnapping is confirmed, only Daeyoung could have pulled that off under the Hukseong flag, and Choi Dae-yeop has just come back to head office. She works out quickly that even if this is partly untrue, the move will fully neutralize the competition's interference, and that Seong-jae has once again proved how far ahead he thinks. With a slight bow, she thanks him sincerely for his trust and for such an important conversation. The man in the gray shirt and his companion quickly agree on a plan, hoping to move things along much faster. Standing in the middle of the snowy street, the stranger in the red scarf asks to be warned immediately if the Daeyoung organization starts moving. He throws a hard look back and walks on into the blizzard, while the woman in glasses smiles warmly and adds that he has come to look far more experienced. The partners listen in silence to her wish for a safe end to the mission, while the bound prisoner sits on the ground by the car. The sky floods with the crimson colors of sunset. The boy walks down the street in fury, not believing his own eyes, because Park Jeong-hyun, the piece of filth he tied up himself, has somehow managed to escape. He blames himself for being late, understanding that the enemy worked everything out in advance and moved to a clear plan. His fists clench with wild rage, and he cannot forgive those animals for daring to lay a hand on his younger sister. The boy swears to get all the way to the top and destroy everyone behind that attack, even if he has to tear them apart with his bare hands. A loud step breaks the night silence, and a red-haired thug snorts with contempt, calling the boy an arrogant loudmouth. He is genuinely outraged that some cocky kid dares run his mouth on someone else's turf and asks whether anybody ever taught him manners. The boy's eyes widen in alarm as he hears fast footsteps right behind him. The red-haired one leaves the ground instantly and drives a kick straight into the boy's chest. The soul crunches into a forearm put up to meet it. Even so, the force is enough to knock him off his feet, and he rolls hard across the cold ground. The attacker straightens up in triumph and advises the boy, mocking him, to keep his head down when he wanders through other people's districts. He stands over his victim menacingly and tells him to learn that simple rule right now while he is still breathing. The boy sits on the asphalt, sweating with pain, while the enemy calmly announces that a guest without a ticket automatically turns into a golden goblin. The red-haired one's face twists into a mad grin and he demands everything the boy has on him. All he wanted was money. A quiet voice comes unexpectedly from deep in the alley. The red-haired boy with the lip-piercing grins insolently and asks whether his opponent thinks all of this is some kind of joke. Do-yoon notices the Cheongmoon school patch and finally understands what kind of upstart is standing in front of him. He narrows his eyes and asks with contempt whether this small-time hooligan playing gangster is not taking on a bit too much. The boy in the green vest steps closer, annoyed, outraged that this little rat is running his mouth. He is grabbed roughly by the jacket, which makes him yelp in fright and point out that the same upstart was just talking about the terrifying Park Jeong-hyun without any fear at all. The red-haired one just twirls a finger at his temple and asks whether he is slow. He adds coldly that this is Guncheong 4 Dong, where nobody cares about their empty threats. Do-yoon says shortly that he knows all of that perfectly well. The redhead walks slowly forward, asking mockingly whether there's really no reasoning with him. The next moment, he explodes off the spot. Picking up speed, the redhead shouts that by the rules of Guncheong's 4th district, even a death in a fight counts as self-defense. Do-yoon calmly raises his fists, ready to take the fight. His tense stance says clearly that he is ready to fight for as long as it takes. The first swing tears through the darkness. Do-yoon takes the initiative instantly and meets the attack with a crushing punch to the jaw. The silhouettes of the witnesses at the end of the alley freeze in surprise. The redhead's eyes go wide in shock, unable to believe his opponent's insane speed. A predatory, merciless fire lights up in Do-yoon's eyes. The next punch goes into the redhead's body and doubles him over. A fist whistles past a millimeter from his face, but he manages to slip it at the last moment. And the next moment, a hard counter stops the redhead's attack with a crack. The redhead tries to reach him with a high kick, forcing his opponent to duck sharply. Do-yoon feels that this fighter's punches are genuinely heavy and slowly raises his head. A wild, predatory smile appears on Do-yoon's scratched face because this fight is starting to light him up properly. It becomes clear that this opponent is nowhere near the level of an ordinary school bully. The redhead dives low and grabs his knee, saying with a grin that the boy can fight after all. Giving Do-yoon no time to recover, the redhead throws himself forward and locks him up. One jerk, and his palm rips out of the hold. Both jump apart, and their souls screech into the asphalt. Do-yoon lifts his head heavily, and pure rage flares in his eyes. The next moment, a powerful turning strike throws him backwards. He puts a hand out, breaking against the asphalt. His fingers cut deep into the ground and stop the wild slide. The redhead just bares his teeth mockingly, and says the boy takes a punch well. Then he cuts him off, saying he does not have the strength to dictate his own rules in Guncheong 4 Dong. Do-yoon analyses the enemy's flawless combinations tensely, understanding that if he does not take the initiative right now, he will simply suffocate under this pressure. It was not even that the redhead's skills went far beyond an ordinary schoolyard thug. His eyes shine with cold confidence, and a contemptuous smile plays on his lips. He is simply insanely strong. Do-yoon gets his breath back and reminds himself that a fight is decided in the head in the end. His coach once explained the main tactic of a fight to Do-yoon. To land a real punch, you have to keep throwing feints without stopping, because only then is the opponent forced to react, and that opens the zone for the decisive attack. The boy tried the advice out at once and shifted sharply to the side. He managed to slip his trainer's counter easily, but the man's fist changed direction instantly and stopped a millimeter from his chin. His coach added calmly that a punch with the other hand is simply impossible to block, and that a clever boy like Do-yoon should have worked that out straight away. He patted his student on the head like a friend and reminded him that brains matter far more in a fight than strength or technique. technique. Back in the present, Do-yoon watches his current opponent carefully and admits that his skill is high. But objectively, this fighter does not look unbeatable to him at all. The red-haired enemy bares his teeth in an arrogant grin at that same moment and gets ready to attack. He has no particular advantage, but he starts circling fast, changing position. A sudden lightning strike cuts through the air. The attacker presses forward, catching his rhythm and forcing Do-yoon to give ground. Do-yoon tries to lean away, but the enemy's heavy fist still clips his cheek and leaves a bloody scrape. The exchange flares up instantly as the redhead comes in with a straight punch and Do-yoon barely gets his forearm up in time. The redhead keeps the punches coming and says through his teeth that his opponent has clearly been in dozens of hard fights. The redhead ducks smartly under another attack and remarks mockingly that anyone hunting this hard for Park Jong-hyun looks pretty suspicious himself. The redhead's eyes narrow instantly. Do-yoon just smiles back, predatory. He answers dryly that his opponent is no less suspicious. Do-yoon's next punch crashes through his guard and makes him shudder from the impact. A fast, sweeping kick to the legs. The redhead loses his balance and watches in fear as an iron fist passes a hair from his face. The air is torn by another whistle, the whites of his eyes flashing in the half-dark. Do-yoon lands his signature attack and throws his opponent back with a heavy shove. The redhead crashes to the ground and can only breathe out, lost. The attacker stands over him with his fist raised and says coldly that in a psychological duel like this, the win will always be his. The boy understands perfectly that even one accurate punch can turn this whole confrontation around. A dull impact shakes the air and throws a thick cloud of dust into the sky. 3 classmates freeze off to the side, not believing their own eyes. The insane power and the polished movements of the enemy point clearly at years of professional training. His opponent tries to reach him with a lightning kick to the head, but the boy slips it easily, and his eyes flash a dangerous red. The red-haired one falls hard, and wiping blood from his split cheek, realizes with horror that what stands in front of him is not an ordinary fighter, but a real monster. In that moment, he feels like a helpless frog at the bottom of a deep well that has never seen the real world. Primal fear paralyzes his body completely. Do-yoon stands over the beaten enemy with a burning look and his fist clenched tight because he needs to show absolute superiority and beat the truth out of him. He mounts his opponent instantly, pinning him to the filthy ground and taking away any chance of resistance. The dust from the hard fight slowly settles and the ordinary calm of the city streets comes back. He lost clean. The redhead forces out hoarsely, looking at the sky through the open door. He raises his fist for another punch, holding the enemy hard against the ground. The grip on his jacket collar gets tighter. The red-haired boy suddenly wheezes, resigned that the winner can take his life. Do-yoon freezes in surprise, looking into his broken face. He genuinely does not understand why anyone would give up his life that easily over an ordinary street fight. He opens his fingers and simply offers to talk it out calmly. The beaten opponent only asks, disbelieving whether he got off that lightly for a man-to-man talk. But the rules of the street are simple, and since the winner wanted it, he had to agree. The boy looks down at him in silence, waiting for him to speak. The redhead finally gets up, rubs his bruised neck, and asks insolently what exactly they are going to talk about. Do-yoon looks at him hard with his red eyes. The boy asks directly whether this dream of his own organization is connected to Park Jong-hyun in any way. He says openly that the fight was only a step towards recognition in the Gunsa faction, and that his real dream is to take over the district and build his own powerful organization. He kept beating that right out of people, fighting shoulder to shoulder with the local street kids. A weak, helpless boss was of little interest to him, and the far more dangerous enemy was Jang Man-gyu, the boss's brainless right hand, terrifying precisely because of it. The big gang spotted that monster before he even reached high school, but later, for lack of brains, wrote him off as an errand boy in the Guncheng district. Even at the bottom, he stayed an animal, and beating him meant winning authority. His listener asks, surprised, where a beaten-up kid gets information this detailed. He only smiles crookedly and answers that the locals connected Park Jong-hyun's growing arrogance with that thug's arrival a long time ago. Because Jong-hyun himself used to be nothing but a frightened bookkeeper in the Gunsa organization's shadow business. That snake only rose when he offered the gang the trade in children as a way out of their money troubles. They raided him for it, but now half the district wants him dead for an ordinary pimp, playing at being a boss. He nods towards the street and remarks that the boys nearby know all about it too. The injured boy asks whether there are any more questions and gets a request for one last favor in return. Do-yoon stands over his beaten opponent and asks whether he has seen Choi Dae-yeop around here lately, and the redhead just grunts a short no. Hearing that, Do-yoon says the conversation is over and turns away, but the wounded opponent suddenly shouts at him to wait. The redhead lifts his bloodied head and asks angrily where he even knows the names Park Jeong-hyun and Choi Dae-yeop from. Do-yoon barely glances back over his shoulder and answers dryly that he has no desire whatsoever to talk about it. Then the redhead spits out everything he cannot understand. How can a boy his own age be stronger than him when he has done nothing but fight in the streets since he was a child?
Do-yoon
Just says calmly that he would like to know that himself. With that, he starts walking away again. Then his heavy step stops suddenly. He turns slowly on his heel and asks why a boy with skills like that is still playing the ordinary school thug. His red eyes fix on his opponent and his voice comes out as a challenge, saying that either they are both simply worthless nobodies, or this district has got too small for the redhead as well. The corners of the redhead's mouth twitch very slightly. He bares his teeth back at him, insolent and predatory. The beaten red-haired fighter wipes the blood off his face and grins insolently, saying through his teeth that all of this is far too small for him. He was not talking about back alleys or his own district, but about something much further away. His ambitions reach the whole country. Everything else looked tiny to him. He asks his opponent why he is still playing hooligan games, because after dozens of clashes with small gangs and big syndicates, he worked out something important. He sinks to the ground in front of his opponent out of strength. That was when he understood that fighting fair is not enough, and that real chaos means risking your head. But now he has suddenly changed his mind and decided he can manage without risking his life, if they work together. Having lost the fight, the boy is ready to obey without a single complaint and simply asks to be taken into the gang. The winner sizes up this simple but useful boy who respects strength and holds no grudges, because extra fighters will not hurt if Gunilpa is going to expand. Do-yoon watches the redhead thoughtfully, understanding that a fighter like this will be useful, but that he has to be tested first. Do-yoon cuts him off, saying it does not work that simply, and asks what his trust in the redhead is supposed to be built on. The redhead smiles bitterly and admits that they have only just met, so demanding trust, even with his head caved in, would be stupid. Then the boy states his condition dryly. The redhead is to go and finish Park Jeong-hyun. The redhead's eyes go wide with sudden shock. A single red eye looks at him out of the thick darkness, radiating deadly seriousness. He adds dryly that only then will he be able to believe him, turns and walks off to quiet footsteps, leaving the beaten group in the light of the setting sun. The boy understands that if this works, the redhead becomes the perfect instrument for solving a lot of his problems. That man always worked by honest and legal methods only, so somebody else had to clean up the consequences and do all the dirty work. And the redhead fits that perfectly, even if his background and his past are still a complete mystery. He understands very well that the street skills of that piece of filth, Yang Jin-suk, are entirely real, so he decides to simply play by his rules for their shared benefit. But the moment that animal shows his real face, he intends to swallow him whole and leave him no chance at all. Suddenly, he stops in front of a wall and orders somebody coldly to come out of hiding right now. Turning his head to the side, he says the name of his uninvited guest straight away, Kim A-yoon. The girl flinches and steps out of the dark, confused. In a shaking voice, she asks how long he has known she was following him. Without even stopping, the boy says over his shoulder that he had her figured out from the very beginning. He heard the door creak quietly behind him almost the moment he stepped over the threshold himself, and his older brother Dong-seon never woke up at that hour, while their father had been drinking since the evening and was out cold, so there was nobody else who could be spying on him. A-yoon just clicks her tongue in irritation, realizing how stupidly and how fast she gave herself away. The boy asks why she is so nervous that she followed him into a dangerous place like this, and the girl shouts back that she has no idea what he is planning because he never tells her anything. Then she breaks into a shout, demanding to know what he has planned and what he even meant about intending to end Park Jeong-hyun's life. The boy only smiles sinisterly in reply, red flashing in his eyes, and says through his teeth that this is ordinary revenge, payment for those animals daring to touch his family. Her brother's look goes ice cold as he says two names, Park Jeong-hyun and Dae-gyung. He states firmly that Park Jeong-hyun is already paying for daring to touch his only sister, and Dae-gyung was picked as a target long before that. His sister only asks again, lost, and he asks her directly whether she believes that the two of them being orphans was a simple coincidence. The girl's eyes go wide with horror. He adds bitterly that their grief was arranged from the very beginning, exactly the way those people once created their own brutal law of strength. In a shaking voice, she reminds him that they were not the only ones hurt by those times. He nods grimly, admitting that the innocent victims of those years cannot be counted. But what if they are not random frogs that somebody threw a stone at, and there's real evidence of the crime? His sister flinches and whispers, asking whether he really has that evidence in his hands. He looks at her firmly and confirms it, saying there is a way. A heavy hand settles on her shoulder as he starts talking about the dirty methods of the big organizations. That is the only way to get rock-solid evidence. The girl goes rigid with shock, her pupils shrinking as the scale of the problem hits her. He promises to show his cards later, and for now demands that she simply trust him and play along. Looking her straight in the eye, he adds seriously that he really does need her help. "Help," she whispers, thrown by it. He stays unmoved, and not one muscle in his face gives away what is happening inside him. Nobody except him even suspected that he knew this secret. His steps echo as he walks away, and she stays standing there, watching him go. The main thing now is to keep all of it in the strictest secrecy. A wrecked body is dragged slowly through the filthy dust. The poor man's face has been turned into one solid bloody mess by the beating. His attacker steps on his back without mercy, right beside a heavy excavator. A bearded man in a blue shirt comes through the half-open door. One of the men present is genuinely surprised by a personal visit from the deputy head of HR. The bearded man breathes out heavily and lowers his eyes. He explains that the woman's name is Lee Ju-hui, that she came in as an intern back when he was in HR, and that now she leaves nobody any room at all, a walking disaster. One of the men suspects a secret connection between them, but his companion dismisses the idea instantly. Scratching the back of his head, the man adds that the deputy now running the department is going to make serious trouble for them. Their opponents were planning to push Shin Deok-cheol forward for physical intimidation and tie their hands with artificial delays from head office. Everything spun up faster than the boss expected, and they were rushing themselves. So all that is left now is to answer the blow. The boss orders Dong Seon and Tai Gyu to prepare to limit the damage from the Shin Deok-cheol business and put Seong Jae in charge of watching headquarters. But he was not about to leave Do Yoon to himself. He orders Seong Jae to talk the boy into moving over to paperwork, but his assistant has doubts, since with a mental state that unstable access to secret documents could be an even bigger threat. The boss insists that it is still safer than the front line, and Seong Jae agrees to find some kind of task for him. Rubbing his forehead wearily, the bearded man lets out a heavy sigh. An unexpected rustle cuts the conversation off. The bloodied, wrecked body of Park Jong-hyun is lying on the floor. Somebody silently holds out a crumpled orange envelope to him. A paper envelope smeared with blood is taken out of his inside pocket. Fury flares in the leader's eyes at whoever dealt with their man that brutally. The name comes immediately, Choi Dae-yeop. A hand slowly opens the crumpled paper packet. Out of it comes a clear bag with a bloody piece of flesh inside, and the words WHO is next written on it in red. His companion just snorts, calling a threat like that far too childish for a man that size. The bearded man studies the grisly find carefully and states that they fell for the provocation anyway. The young man in the white shirt realizes that the other side's plan worked far too well, because the enemy was not even aiming at them directly and simply used Park Jong-hyun to get this far. The bearded man calmly takes the paper packet and calls that kind of move entirely rational. But his look gets a lot heavier when he thinks about the danger if Choi Dae-yeop really is behind all of it. The evening sun slowly fades over the Huxeong construction site. Two bloodied workers lie in the dust on the ground, and one of them barely manages to wheeze out a question, asking whether it really is him who came. The man in the white shirt bares his teeth and yanks the wounded man up by the hair. A figure in a black jacket stands nearby, and an inhuman scream of pain tears the air apart. In a mad burst of rage, the bloodied man sinks his teeth straight into the other man's shoulder, his jaws grinding shut with a horrible sound. On the dusty site, the fighter in the white shirt, drenched in blood, wipes his face, with the wrecked worker lying on the ground behind him. The stranger in the dark jacket says with contempt that he only came here out of boredom, having heard about his successes. The madman only grins back at him, a horrible smile flooded with crimson blood. The bearded man in the blue shirt thinks out loud that the man must have seen a convenient moment and started moving, although doing it alone after coming back to Daeyoung headquarters would not have been easy. Grim now. The bearded man in the blue shirt tells his partner quietly that a warning that Brazen is not sent for nothing. Now that this psychopath can act on his own again, he is openly trying to drag them into his bloody game. The speed they moved at made Daeyoung's side start moving too. His black-haired partner just looks back over his shoulder calmly and offers to go and see the surprises prepared for them in person. Whatever they have prepared, he is not going to wait because they have to strike before Choi Dae-yeop makes his move. The bearded man grins boldly and promises to clean up Guncheongdong first. The evening sun floods the street with crimson as they walk slowly past empty houses, their steps echoing quietly off the walls. She had suspected it for a long time, although her childhood memories had been badly worn down by the shock she went through. But one thing she remembered for certain, and that was that it all happened far too suddenly. He walks ahead of her, silent and closed off from the whole world by his broad back. The girl being left an orphan turned out to be the fault of some powerful organization, but to fight it, she needed evidence nobody could dispute. Was the whole tragedy of her life somebody's carefully planned scheme? The same terrifying childhood memory kept surfacing in her dreams, hands in black gloves hurriedly sweeping her things together, while she watched a dark figure in the corner of the room in fright. A rough hand in a black glove suddenly grabbed her thin wrist and held it tight. An unknown man dragged the terrified little girl after him towards the exit, into the dark. The little girl screamed in fear and stretched a hand out in front of her. In front of her stood three men in formal suits and sunglasses, looking down at her from above, their faces spread into predatory, self-satisfied smiles. The memory broke off into solid darkness. She stood alone on the balcony and finally admitted that everything she had seen was not made up and not a bad dream. Tears build up in her eyes and sweat runs down her cheek as she tries to take in the whole absurdity of it. The boy turns round against the sunset-lit alley and says quietly that she should go home and just rest. But the girl says no shortly, and he stops mid-word. She declares firmly that she is taking this on together with him, because now it is a shared trouble. She adds firmly that she wants to decide her own fate, even if she has to start with small errands, the way she did as a child. He looks at her with unspeakable pain, trying to stop her from taking this dangerous step. His memories carry him back to the past, where as a boy he knelt and humiliated himself begging a crime boss for mercy. His knees shook on the cold floor back then, under the contemptuous stares of the gangsters. The boss of the time, in dark glasses, only smiled with contempt at a child's tears. The second man, the bearded one, watched in silence with a heavy, unblinking stare. The boy lowers his head sadly, suddenly understanding what kind of hell their father once had to live through. She asks him sternly whether he really has no objections. Her brother only lets out a heavy, resigned sigh. The boy admits that he has endless objections, but that there's simply no point arguing now. Instead, he offers her something else, putting a hand gently on her head and telling her to stay close to Uncle Han Seong-jae. Her brother assures her that those strange old men were legends once, so she will definitely learn everything. As they part, he asks her to stay alert and promises to be careful himself too. She watches him go with worry in her eyes. The girl asks her brother not to make her worry and promises not to get into trouble. He suddenly gives the order to move out, which surprises her. His look turns deadly the instant he says the name Park Jeong-hyun through his teeth. His sister disagrees and insists that this problem is for Yang Jun-seok to solve. The sun goes down slowly, calling them home. The next stop is Guncheong-dong, where the night streets are boiling with life under the lamps. Walking through the block, the girl remarks that it is much nicer and cleaner here than in the first district. Then she stops sharply, struck dumb, because a familiar figure has appeared in front of her. Not far off stands an elegant silver-haired woman with a cold expression. She folds her arms impatiently because the people she is waiting for are hopelessly late. She gives them their first serious black mark. The silver-haired woman turns and walks away, not noticing the astonished looks of the teenagers behind her. An irritated curse escapes through her teeth. Suddenly, a blue car stops sharply in front of her with a loud screech of brakes. The driver in a suit leans hurriedly out of the window, apologizing for being so late because of an accident on the road. He even asks lightly whether she happens to be angry. The boy narrows his eyes, because this woman's face looks familiar to him from somewhere. The girl looks at him in surprise, remarking that this woman's name should mean nothing to him, unless he has heard about her before. The rumor was that she earned more on her own than the whole of Guncheongdong put together, and that nobody knew her real name or her age, because her face could only be seen at Hongdong, the place where she worked. Right now, she sits calmly in the half-dark of a luxury car with her eyes closed, ignoring the outside world completely. The real power in Guncheong's 4th district has a name, and that name is Hyungcheong. She owned everything anyone could dream of, and drew famous people to her from all over the country. The boy is surprised that she is younger than he expected, and his companion immediately asks jealously whether he thinks she is beautiful. What was strange was something else. A woman squeezed between big organizations had made Guncheong untouchable all by herself, and she went about without guards. He sharply denies knowing her at all, although a second ago he was talking about her like an expert. The girl explains eagerly that the local girls are absolutely mad about the mysterious rich woman and try to copy her style in everything. The boy just shrugs, insisting that he is only repeating the rumors about a local celebrity. The stranger's face keeps nagging at his memory, but the answer slips away. Inside the car, a tipsy man asks the beauty, fawning, whether she is offended that he was late. Meanwhile, in the same luxury car, that beauty with the elegant earrings remarks that she has been waiting for this meeting too. Beside her, the drunk director spreads into a fawning laugh, complaining that getting to a woman this busy and this important took him months of booking. She soothes him gently, assures him that she holds no grudge at all, coquettishly fixes her hair, and remarks that the director spared neither time nor money for her, and her unusually relaxed tone surprises him a great deal. The man melts completely at that and happily offers to open a special bottle he was saving for this evening. His companion gasps in surprise and adds flirtatiously that there was no need for him to wear himself out like that for her. The blue car races through the night city to the loud laughter of the director, who boasts drunkenly that for his darling Hyungcheong an elite wine like this is the modest minimum. Still chattering, he compares people to wine, which only gets better and finer with the years. The girl plays along cheerfully and expresses complete admiration for his profound thought, clapping her hands. The beauty calls him far more generous than the other misers from Huxiang, and the drunk director declares pompously that his colleagues have a long way to go to reach his level. The girl thanks the director coquettishly for the calm and safe work in Guncheongdong, and he waves it off awkwardly. Playing modest, the director gets generous with promises, saying she only has to say the word. The men who used to hang around her here, he has already removed, and he is ready to hand her their contacts right now. Let her keep them as servants and run them however she likes, he adds. The beauty just waves it away, saying what he has done for her is already more than enough. His face flushes deep red with excitement, and his lips spread into a disgusting, predatory leer. The car stops, and his companion steps out first, asking whether he is going to have a smoke before they go inside. She warns him sweetly to look after himself, because his health is not made of iron, so he should keep it to a few drags. The director almost melts with happiness, insisting that only his darling Hyungcheong truly cares about him. The man promises to smoke exactly 2 cigarettes while he deals with some business, and Hyungcheong's eyes flash a dangerous red as she decides to go on ahead and prepare everything. She calls back playfully that he should take his time and come down slowly. A lighter clicks in the dark, and standing alone, the man draws deep on the smoke and looks up at the gloomy tower block. He gets himself ready for the conversation, wondering where exactly Lee Ju-hui is right now. Dragging on the cigarette, he says with irritation that making deputy head and still not being able to arrive on time is going too far. 2 men in suits stand by a car discussing their colleague's adventure that night, since she managed to run somebody over in the middle of Guncheongdong and is now rushing to the meeting. He swears that the world has come to subordinates making their superiors wait, and right then he is told that she has arrived. Footsteps sound down the corridor, the woman bows in silence and admits that she has no excuse, and he immediately asks why she was late. Then, the chief decides to forgive her for being late because of her excellent results, but strongly advises her to be prepared next time. Deputy head Lee Ju-hui calmly explains that on her way to an investigation in Guncheong-won-dong, she ran over Park Jong-hyun, who had been dumped right on the road. The boss says thoughtfully that the name sounds familiar, and Ju-hui adds that the man worked for Daegyeong and supplied goods into Guncheong-for-dong. She came across his body while going to check the rumors about a new recruit in Kim Moo-won's team, which her chief finds extremely suspicious straight away. Letting Ju-hui deal with the matter herself, the boss suddenly asks whether that scum Han Seong-jae is still of any use to them. Her look goes ice cold behind her lenses. Yes, he is still useful, she says shortly into the dark. A predatory spark flickers deep in her violet pupils. The subordinate walks behind his chief and complains under his breath that he feels genuinely sorry for Seong-jae, suggesting they at least bring the boy back? A sharp shout from the boss cuts him off mid-word as he flicks his cigarette butt down with contempt and says through his teeth that the right to make decisions here belongs to him alone. The frightened subordinate bows low, admitting his mistake, and his chief simply orders him dryly not to take his eyes off the target. The assistant in glasses tenses noticeably when the boss orders that Shin Deok-chil be sent in first if it comes to it, and then simply disposed of. She tries to object, but the words stick in her throat. The boss turns sharply with a mad leer and barks at her, whether he looks like a man asking for her opinion right now. The girl bends into a frightened bow and hurriedly explains that she only wanted to report first on the clash between Kim Moo-won's boys and Choi Dae-yop of Daejeong. The boss fixes an icy stare on her and says shortly, "Continue." Lowering her voice, she asks him for a little time. The assistant breathes out and quietly suggests getting rid of all of them in one go, together with the competitors from Daejeong.